We are now live.
Thank you. Welcome to the Estimates Committee. I'm Councillor Carpenter. I'm the chair of the Estimates Committee, and with me is the rest of council. And Councillor Martin is the vice chair of finance, so vice chair of this Estimates Committee. He will be assisting today if need be. Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Van Tilburg is not able to attend as he has a work commitment. So, Mr. Deputy Clerk, please call the roll.
Certainly. Councillor Weaver.
Present.
Councillor Martin.
Here.
Councillor Utley.
Here.
Councillor Antosky.
Here.
Councillor Vanderstel.
Here.
Councillor Wall.
Present.
Councillor Sless.
Present.
Mayor Davis.
Present.
Councillor McCreary.
I'm here.
And Chair Carpenter.
Here, just a few rules. All motions, I want to remind you that all motions need to be moved and seconded that come before tonight at the Estimates Committee. Each speaking opportunity for each member is 3 minutes, and there's no limit to the number of speaking opportunities that you have. Tonight's meeting will commence with the delegation portion of the agenda, followed by an overview by the Director of Finance and the City Treasurer, and an opening presentation by the Chief Administration Officer and the Director of Finance and City Treasurer. Is there any declarations of conflict of interest of anyone before tonight's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move forward to continuation for the delegations. Now, I want to remind the delegations that coming forward, members of the committee, these delegations are for the capital budget portion of the city's estimate process only. Delegates, please ensure that your remarks are to the capital projects as they relate to the 2021 budget on this agenda. Capital budgets, we will have a separate delegation portion for the operating budget coming forward further on down the road. This capital budget will commence over a meeting of 3 meetings, possibly 4, depending upon how well we do. I'd also ask the delegates when they come forward, please clarify whether they are a resident of our community when they come forward. And I want to remind everyone that we want to be cordial and polite, and any of the delegations, any remarks, negative or otherwise, any member of council will not be tolerated. And we would and the vice versa goes for members of council to members of the delegations. We want to be all polite and cordial tonight. So having said that, I would like to ask Elizabeth Chernichenko, I hope I got that right, to come forward to the delegates table and state your name, your residency, and for the clerk to commence with their presentation. You have 10 minutes, inclusive of questions from members of the committee. Thank you.
Hi there. Hello, everybody, and Happy New Year's to everybody. I am Elizabeth Chernichenko. Thanks for the attempt, Councillor Carpenter. It was close. I am raised in Brantford, and my family are long-term residents and homeowners here. And I'm in university outside of town. However, I'm living in Brantford currently. So I'd like to bring up a few items that were in the capital budget that I saw, project ID 001930, that is referencing Arrowdale Community Park Development. So in this item, I see that there is an allotted $2 million for 2021, as well as a future allotted 24 $2 million. Now, what I'm asking is if we're able to have clarification or to be provided a breakdown as to the cost of expenditures, given the survey that was titled Reimagining Arrowdale, close to 40% of respondents, by far the largest group requested verbatim rolling hills with a variety of tree cover, which is very much exactly how it is today. So I'm wondering how the quantity amounted to $4 million over the duration of 3 years for that project. Another thing I was going to request is the project ID 001947. So that is to the cost of $75,000. It's to install electronic signature usage by the city. And I was not sure anyone who uses technology uses Adobe for electronic signatures. And so I'm not sure how using that and a subscription to that for the City Hall, as well as using potential confidential emails, would not suffice instead of a $75,000 budget, when the justification for the sale of Arrowdale was that it made a deficit of $30,000. So for me, it just seems like it makes the amount that a huge city asset was respectfully justified to be sold how those two don't really equate according to the budget and priorities. Another aspect in comparison is the library costs $50,000 for security cameras, and Arrowdale was not an expense, it was an asset to the community at large, especially with concerns of COVID and recreational space to inner city residents. Another concern that I saw with this capital budget here is the new fleet of hybrid diesel buses. Now, last December, 2019 December, there was a unanimous or almost a unanimous motion and approval for City of Brantford recognizing the climate change crisis, declaring a climate emergency. And so I see that in conjunction with federal lines of funding, there will be a new fleet of hybrid buses. However, this is one of the few cities I've seen that don't have a compost program citywide yet. And for this size, having a fleet of compost trucks could substantially, on a larger degree, reduce the methane gas production from anaerobic decomposition within the landfill site over on Mohawk Road, where there is a constant stream of plume of fire burning the methane from decomposing materials underground. So for me, it's a question of whether or not the city is serious about its prioritization of its budgets, as the city residents do very much so and have vocally expressed through many petitions a desire to have green spaces retained in inner city areas, having those trends be synonymous in city planning and sustainable development across cities all over, with even Dallas, Texas approving, I think, a $6 billion project to have an inner city park be developed along its waterways. So the question of progressiveness isn't really one as such as keeping up with city planning. And so I come as a resident today to hope that our councillors are representing the need for a greener city. In good news, I saw a high school student at Tim Hortons pull out a metal straw from their backpack. So it's really bright, and it's a good day to see that at your local Tim Hortons, when even the local high school students are caring to put in their little bit of help to make the city better. So thank you, everyone. Again, I did ask one direct question about the breakdown to the project ID 001930, if that is part of this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I don't have any questions from members of the committee at this point on my list, but staff will endeavor to get those questions and answers to you that you, the answers to your questions that you asked via your email. If you leave your information with us, we'll get staff to give you the professional direct answer to the questions that you've asked as much as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I would now ask Eric Mundy to come forward to the delegation table and state your name for the clerk, and whether you're a resident or not, and you have 10 minutes for your, including council questions. Eric, please. If Eric's speaking, we cannot hear him.
Sorry, we seem to be having just a moment of difficulties with Mr. Mundy. It looks like his sound.
Hello?
There we go.
Okay, we're good.
Can you hear me?
We can now. You have 10 minutes inclusive of questions of council. Mr. Mundy, please go forward.
Okay, I have a few questions, not really even questions, it has to do with process here. In that I take a look at the budget, and it really lacks detail for me as a citizen to even make a decision on whether I could comment or not. In that there's terminology in there, DCS. I fully understand what a third party is. However, it doesn't identify who the third party financing is from on budget items. When it comes to debenture, I understand that 100%, but there's absolutely no details on why a debenture in one case would even be considered when there's money in the budget. When it comes to transparency, in that record, in the budget itself, there are 83 times it says study, 108 times it says assessment. Now, I'd like to know, what are they studying and what are the assessments for? And the reason I say that is that time and time again, I read budgets, I've been through it all my life, where an assessment goes nowhere, a study goes nowhere. So what's the desired outcome by the city for doing these studies? One case has to do with buses. I guess they're diesel hybrids, $150,000. Well, that truly, you could Google that and find, hey, you know what? Is it worth it? The diesels that you have now are high efficient diesels. And I see really no reason. I know that there's a climate initiative and whatever, but I'd like to know why all this money is being spent. And it's just, I don't know, odd, very odd that the city isn't releasing details when they should be releasing details. There's another line item having to do with, the mayor had an initiative, I believe it was in February, to collect $90,000 to fix the tower. Well, all of a sudden it's ballooned to over $500,000.
Is that item in the budget, Eric?
Beg your pardon?
Is that item in the capital budget you're speaking to, the tower?
Yes, it is. And the way I read, there's a line item that there are a few details, but it also goes back to the mayor initiative. Like, I can understand, it's a good deed to do the tower, but then when it balloons out of control, I just don't get it. So my points are, I cannot comment on this budget. There are no details. There's no line items. Millions of dollars for the library. Why? Police station. Why? It's all why? And all those items of studies, etc. And it's millions of dollars, millions. And I just don't understand why I'm put in a position, and people are, to do an assessment based on nothing. My idea is that I speak to my counselor. I and we the people select counselors. They represent us. I should be speaking to my counselors, not to this committee. And I believe it used to be like that. And all of a sudden it changed that, oh, well, participation. Yeah, what is it? 3 people signed up for this. 3. Does it make sense? You still there? All right. And I just find it unfair. And I don't know what, I can understand why. So that council can say, oh, people participate. It's all good. It's like, no, they can't when there's no knowledge base for me to actually say, you know what? I made a difference. I won't. I don't have the tools to do this.
Is that it, sir?
That's it.
Okay, I just want to highlight to Mr. Mundy that you can always speak to your members of council by just giving them a phone call. And we will make sure that if you leave your email and your contact information, we will provide you with the link that provides the actual line items, and along with that has the actual page describing why the line item is all about. And that description is available on the city's website, but we'll make sure that you have those actual links. And if you wish to have them in hard copy, let us know that information is available. And thank you for coming.
Councillor Carpenter, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Goodbye.
I would like to ask Dan Oakes to come forward now to the delegation table and state your name and whether you are a resident. And you have 10 minutes to make your points, including inclusive questions of council. Thank you.
Okay, am I here?
You are, sir.
Okay, Happy New Year, Council. Let's hope this year is better than the last year. And my name is Dan Oakes. I've been living in Brantford all my life, 57 years. and I've seen a lot of changes. And I want to speak to 001930, which is the Airedale borrowing $2 million in 2021 and $2 million in 2024. What would be the terms of this loan? I understand debentures are usually about a 10-year period or better, and they're usually paid, I understand, semi-annually. So do we have the terms of these two loans? Because it's going to be at minimum about 13 years of loans on this $4 million totaled. And do we have a possible final cost estimate of how much we'd be paying back over this term of the debentures? And the other question I have, Ellie asked mine about the breakdown of the funds, but there was another little item not too long ago from MBTW out of Toronto for $158,970 for design. Is that included in the $4 million somewhere, or is that a whole separate cost that will be incurred? I think $4 million is awful excessive for a park unless it's going to have one heck of a lot of stuff in there. But that's, I don't know. I do have an idea of what park equipment costs. That's what my company does. I know it's expensive. I work for a company that does the Paris playground equipment, have for years. In fact, almost all our benches and garbage cans are on city property right now. I guess that's the only questions I got. I do oppose this extent of spending, because I kind of think $4 million is an awful lot of money for a playground, even if there was a splash pad in there. So I guess that's about the extent of what I have to ask tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Oakes. And I think you did say that you were a resident of Brantford, did you not?
57 years.
That's what you said. Okay. So I have a question, Councillor Wall.
Thank you, Chair Carpenter. Dan, thanks for coming. You mentioned in your comments about $4 million was a lot for a park unless it had a bunch of stuff. What kind of stuff would you like to see in the Airedale Park?
Well, in any park, like I've seen one at Mohawk Park, and it is impressive. We have Pate Park down by us, and that was done, and that was nice. Linden Hills Park was nice. I don't think you need to go real big, but a splash pad I think would be critical because of the kind of temperatures we have in our city anymore, and with the climate, they make great cooling stations for the little kids. And I don't think there's anything in that area that has a Conklin Park would have been a good spot, but however, if a park is to go in there, I think a splash pad would be a great asset. Even something along the lines of what is in Earl Hague, where you'd have some kind of a pool where you could swim in, because then that would engage some of the older kids and that are not going to want to use a splash pad, because you're 10, 12 years old. You probably don't want to run around a splash pad with the 2-year-olds. You might need Woodman Park as another example of what would be something but a pool like that and a splash pad. And for 17 acres, I think you can probably squeeze that in. And another asset, even though the temperatures don't really warrant it as much, but the ability to have a winter rink in there. If you're going to put in the plumbing for a splash pad, you could have something where you could have the neighborhood run a winter rink like we do in at Linden Hills and Pate and whatnot. There would be the room to do that. You know, if you're going to spend $4 million plus interest over X amount of time, you may as well go big. Because going small and spending that kind of money really doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Thank you so much for coming and sharing your thoughts on the budget.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Wall, and thank you, Councillor Mr. Oakes. We will make sure that the information that you asked gets to you. You asked about the debenture costs, and we'll have staff forward something to you by email for that information for the questions that you asked.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. That ends the delegations that we have for tonight, members of council. So I'd like to ask Director of Finance to provide an overview of steps 1 through B and C.
Thank you, through you, Chair Carpenter. I'll just start at the worksheet at step 1B. Just to remind Council that it was Council's direction for the Estimates Committee to begin now in January. And the report that approved that direction did indicate that the 2021 capital budget and the long-term capital plan would be considered and approved first prior to the operating budget. At this time, we are asking the Estimates Committee to only consider the 2021 capital budget for approval. There's a number of other initiatives that are ongoing that are going to be impacting the projects and the funding for the remaining years of a long-term plan. So that's something we're going to continue to work on and present to the Estimates Committee at a later date. So for this process right now, we're just looking at the 2021 capital budget. So just to summarize that and moving to step 1C of the worksheet, you'll note that the 2021 capital budget is in the amount of $88,922,497. This budget is proposed to be funded from a number of sources, approximately $7.8 million from development charges, almost $5.2 million from gas tax, a little over $21 million from grants and other third-party contributions, over $23 million from our user rate reserves, over $26 million from tax supported reserves, and $4.8 million from debenture financing. And I'll go into further detail on these funding sources and the details of the plan in my opening presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Daniels. I would now like to call on Brian Hutchings, Chief Administrative Officer, and Joelle to do their Director of Finance Treasurer's report to provide their opening presentations to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Carpenter and Councillor Carpenter. I'll be very short. I want to thank Council for understanding. This has been this word's been overused, but unprecedented year for us. We've done projections 3 or 4 times this year with not just normal projections, but COVID-related loss in revenues and increase in expenditures and what have you. So our finance department has been working overtime, to say the least. So we thank the council for allowing us to do this, start the year off. And as Joelle mentioned, the report did say it's important to get our capital budget looked at, and we're just finalizing now for February. Our operating budget will be coming forth. But I'd also like to thank finance group as well as Public Works, and you see that they've done the lion's share of the budget and all the budget preparers. We've gone through this numerous times and asked each other questions and really looked at what's really needed and what's not needed in this budget. We will be, as I mentioned, we will be doing the capital in January, and as well as the operating budget in February. So I'd like to thank Council and turn this over to Joelle, who will give a more detailed presentation. Thank you, Councillor Carpenter.
Great, thank you, Brian. So I'll just go through a brief presentation on the 2021 preliminary capital budget and how that was developed and what the plan looks like. So next slide, please. So we do have a number of key strategic documents that drive the development of the capital budget and the updates to the long-term capital plan. And many of these key inputs, all the ones that are noted on the chart here, have been recently updated or are currently being updated at this time. So that includes the official plan, the updated transportation master plan and master servicing plans, updates to our asset management plans, as well as an updated set of council priorities. Next slide, please. So the Estimates Committee is typically provided with a fully funded multi-year capital plan. And in recent years, that has been a 10-year forecast that's based on a number of various assumptions. Right now, we have a number of changes occurring that are impacting the capital program. First, as I noted, we've got a large number of capital needs that have been recently identified as part of the updated Transportation Master Plan and Master Servicing Plan. Secondly, we're currently updating our development charges background studies, 2 of them actually, one that will develop an area-specific development charge for the boundary expansion lands, as well as updates to our citywide development charges as well. Thirdly, we've seen new leadership in our Public Works Commission that's very committed to reassessing the capital program there and completing the corporate-wide asset management plans. So in light of all of this, Estimates Committee will only be presented with the 2021 capital budget for consideration at this time. Next slide, please. I also wanted to highlight a number of funding constraints that we've seen in developing this year's 2021 capital plan. First, Council did approve through the Budget Guidelines and Direction Report earlier this year that no capital levy increase would be applied to the 2021 budget. Secondly, we have no anticipated casino contributions for 2021 coming into the capital plan. So typically our casino funds allocation policy would see 20% of casino funds used for capital purposes annually. So we're not anticipating any funds from the casino. And lastly, we had some forecasted land sale proceeds in our previous plan that have now been redirected to other purposes or are no longer planned to occur in the near term. So all of these are putting a funding crunch on our capital program. Next slide, please. I just wanted to highlight that there are a number of ways in which capital is funded, and I'll just maybe start at the bottom left side, firstly with developer contributions, which of course those funds come from developers mainly in the form of development charges. And then just continuing to move clockwise, the next 3 categories of funding are service-specific capital funding envelopes, our general capital reserves, and our capital levy reserves. Those 3 combined are funded largely from contributions from the tax-supported operating budget. Next, we have our user rate reserves, which is largely funded from our water and our wastewater rates. We have grants and gas tax and grants, which is largely monies that we receive from senior levels of government. And then lastly, debt is the last funding source that we've used to fund the program. Next slide, please. I'll just briefly touch on each of these funding sources. And I'll start with developer contributions, which is largely the development charges that we collect from the developers, typically at the time of building permit issuance. Development charges can only be used to fund the eligible growth-related portion of capital projects. And they're typically identified as future needs through the completion of other studies, such as the Transportation Master Plan and Master Servicing Plan. But they also could include other developer contributions that we receive, such as cash in lieu of parkland. Next slide, please. Next, we have our service-specific capital funding envelope reserves. So these reserves receive set contributions from the operating budget annually. They total $13.2 million, with the largest amounts provided to roads, fleet, facilities, IT services, and the John Noble Home. These service-specific envelopes, they are largely underfunded and have not been increased since 2009. Next slide, please. Next, we have our general capital and our capital levy reserves. And these are also funded from the operating budget with contributions totaling $7.1 million. Our general capital contribution is $1.9 million annually, and we can use these funds for any tax-supported capital initiative. Funds have been raised for this purpose from previous debt retirement and the closure of old service-specific envelopes. And again, we're not receiving any casino or not anticipating to receive any casino revenues for capital purposes in 2021. But normally under the policy, we would see between $1 and $1.2 million being directed to this general capital reserve annually as well. So typically more like 2.9 or $3 million annually, but this year it's just 1.9. And then lastly, we have our capital levy, which is 5.2 million, which is the annual accumulated amount to date that's in the base budget since that special capital levy was introduced. So combined, the previous slide with the service specific capital and this general capital and capital levy reserves, the ones that are funded mainly from the operating budget, they received just over $20 million in contributions annually. A small portion of that, 1.1 million, is funded from utility dividends, with the remainder of the funding representing about 12% of the tax levy annually. Next slide, please. User rate reserves do fund a number of the rate supported projects in the capital plan. Most of this comes from the water and wastewater utility rates, large contributions annually going towards the significant capital requirements that are needed for water and wastewater. There was $16 million combined in the 2020 budget allocated to those water and wastewater reserves. Just to note too, there will be a rate review undertaken in 2021 for those utility rates. Next slide, please. Gas tax and grants are another significant source of capital funding. Federal gas tax is a permanent source of funding for municipal infrastructure, and currently the city is receiving $6.1 million annually from federal gas tax. And in addition, we have a number of grants that are funding the 2021 capital program. And in recent years, we've been successful in our applications for a number of grants, including Public Transit Infrastructure Fund, Clean Water Wastewater Fund, Ontario Municipal Commuter Cycling Fund, the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund, Homes for Good, energy conservation grants, as well as the ISIP transit grants most recently. Next slide, please. And lastly is debt. It's important to note that we are still operating within the council imposed 7% annual repayment limit. The province has its limit set for all municipalities, which is 25% debt servicing as a percentage of own source revenues. We currently have $65 million in debt issued for 14 projects. 6 of those are tax supported with annual payments of $3.3 million, and 8 are rate supported with annual payments of $2.8 million. So when we look at the debt we have issued currently, in addition to our annual lease obligations, which also contribute towards our limit, we're currently at 3.15% of own source revenues by way of servicing costs. We also have $73 million of debt that's been authorized to be issued, but hasn't been issued yet. So this is for capital works in progress. Once we take our current debt and what is to be issued into consideration, it's estimated that will reach a high point of 4.95% servicing as a percentage of own source revenues in 2024. And when we look at what's proposed to be added in the approval of the 2021 budget, that would put us at 5% of own source revenues. Next slide, please. So when it comes to debt, we did take a look at our KPMG comparator municipalities. It's important to note that the last province-wide information available for all municipalities was from the 2020 annual repayment limit schedules. But that information is based on 2018 financial information returns. So that explains a bit of the inconsistency from the previous slide where I said Brantford is 3.15, whereas based on our 2018 information, we're now showing on this slide at 3.96%. But to be able to compare apples to apples with our comparator municipalities, the 2020 annual repayment limit calculations is the best information that's available out there. So you can see from the chart, based on that information, we are the second lowest. We have the second lowest debt servicing ratio in our comparator group. And even as we move towards the potential to be at 4.95 or 5% with what is already authorized to be issued and what could be approved through this 2021 capital budget, at 5%, we're still at the middle of the pack with our comparator group. Next slide, please. And next slide. So just a brief summary of the 2021 capital budget. Again, it's $88.9 million. When we look at this chart here, it's no surprise that Public Works is the substantial component of our capital program at 72.9%. And when we look at Public Works and then layer on emergency services, as well as community services and social development, which is essentially just our social housing capital, combined, those three commissions account for 97% of the capital program. Next slide, please. And then just another look at the capital budget, and this chart outlines how that is proposed to be funded. I did go through this on the worksheet as well. What's key to note here is the first four categories of funding, developer contributions and gas tax and grants and other third-party contributions, and the rate reserves account for 65% of the funding for this budget, with the remainder funded from our capital or from our tax-supported capital reserves and a small amount of debt. Next slide, please. So I did just want to highlight some of the items from the funding sources. You would have noted that there is significant grant funding being used to fund this 2021 capital program, and much of that is coming from an application that we've made for a rapid housing grant to support our housing build program, as well as OSIF funding and ISIP transit funding. I did just want to highlight again that the debt proposed in this budget, in addition to what's already issued and authorized, would bring the city to 5% servicing costs as a percent of own source revenues. Beyond that, there still is $100 million in capacity available to the end of 2030 within Council's existing 7% limit. But we do know that there is a significant backlog of capital needs, even prior to considering new projects from the updated transportation plan and master servicing plan, as well as those projects that are going to be needed to service the boundary expansion lands. Next slide. So next steps for the Estimates Committee. You will consider the 2021 capital budget only in January. It's hopeful that Council would approve the 2021 capital budget at its regular meeting on January the 26th, and this will allow for construction tenders that are included as part of this 2021 capital budget to be let. And staff are going to continue to work in the meantime on continuing to update the asset management plans, as well as its work on the development charges background studies for both the area specific and the citywide development charges. This work is key as the studies will update the costs of the growth-related capital program, and it will identify the growth shares and the estimated future DC revenue streams that will allow us to better complete a multi-year capital plan that we can present to estimates later this year. And that's the end of my presentation. I'll be happy to take any questions.
You're muted, Councillor Carpenter.
Okay, how did I get muted? Okay, there we go. Okay, I have Councillor Otley first in the order, then Celeste, then Weaver. Councillor Otley, you're first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff. On one of the slides, it shows the gas tax revenues, $6.1 million. Given that more people are working from home, is there any fear from the provincial government or the feds that that amount will be reduced in the near future?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we're not aware of any upcoming announcements that would lend to any direction that those revenues might be reduced in the near term. I believe we are in a agreement right now with respect to the federal gas tax program that's in line till 2023. So I do believe, at least until then, those annual payments would be secured.
That's good to know, Joelle. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Otley. Councillor Celeste.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Joelle, if this budget was approved as presented, we would rise to the 5% of the debt limit from 4.95, I believe, up to 5. Is there a chart anywhere showing, obviously this year we're going to be making payments as well on our debt. So at the end of 2021, we would still not be at the 5%. We would have reduced that somewhat, would we not? Is there somewhere that shows that sliding scale as we go through year by year, that we know that what we're creating as far as space by the payments that we're making?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. We do have a very detailed schedule which we track our payments. So it's not just the debt servicing we have to take into account, it's also our lease obligations. When existing debt matures, that opens up additional room for us, as well as making some assumptions on how our own source revenues are going to inflate themselves over time as well. So on the slide, I did note that as of today, so just with what's issued right now, we're at 3.15% of our current own source revenues. We do plan to get to that 4.95%, or I guess the 5% if we assume this 2021 capital budget is approved as well. We're going to see that high in 2024. That's our estimation. So we're going to go from 3.15 to 4 to 4.25 to 5. But then it starts to decrease again after that as some of our existing debt matures, and then that starts to open up more room for the rest of the 10-year plan. And that's when I indicated that there's $100 million of capacity. We couldn't issue that today and remain in the 7%, but after 2024, we start to build up that capacity again.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Celeste. Councillor Weaver, you have the floor.
Thank you, Councillor Carpenter. So we did talk briefly about the casino and the fact that there is no casino revenue anticipated for 2021. There is a lot of good community groups that were getting funding from the casino revenue. Is there a plan in place to revisit that scenario and see if they were good enough for casino dollars, perhaps they're good enough for tax dollars, and maybe that's something that we should take a look at to see if in fact we should be funding these folks still. And if not, I think we owe it to them to let them know so they can at least try to find other revenue sources.
Yep, through you, Mr. Chair. So council did approve a mitigation strategy in late fall. that would address the potential loss of casino revenues through 2021. That did include some community grant programs put on hold for 2021, not all, but some. But that's certainly something that could be considered as we get into the operating budget discussions.
I'm just curious if there's an appetite of council to take a look at those opportunities of giving to community groups. If it's that important to us as a council, we should be doing that regardless. And maybe we should be looking at other ways to use the casino funding rather than potentially losing it and now having all these groups that we're really counting on the funding go by the wayside. So that's my first question. And then just my second one, Mr. Chair. During the delegations, there was a pretty clear indication to me that one in particular of the delegations didn't understand our process. Coming to council the first day, asking us why. I mean, that's why we are all here at the estimates committee, to learn why staff wants the budget approved the way they do. And that's where we ask questions. So I'm wondering if the next time we have delegations, if there's an opportunity to maybe do a little memo to explain the process a little bit better. And that's, I'll just leave that for staff. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Weaver. Councilor McCurry.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Councilor Weaver raises an interesting question about our commitment to community groups and the utilization of casino funding. And I wonder if it's time that perhaps we had a revision to our casino policy. We've seen fit to commit to people 5 and 10 years out, and now we've found ourselves in a position where we don't have money to give, and perhaps it's time that we had a look at what we do with casino funds. And maybe we're completely on the wrong track. Maybe we should be salting that away and spending the accrued interest like the province of Alberta did at one time. That's my comment on that. Joelle, my memory is not what it once was. I wonder if you could confirm for me that we have finally paid off the debt on the Yellow Rink and the Colburn Street expropriation.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, you will be happy to know that we have reached the maturity date on the Yellow Rink. So those servicing obligations ended in 2020.
And can you remind me how long that Yellow Rink's been in the landfill, Joelle? Would it be about 8 years?
I really could. I live in Brantford. I would let's guess about 12.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I gather I've made my point. So that does free up some debt service for us, then, doesn't it?
Yes. Anytime we see our maturity of one of our existing debt issues, it does open up extra capacity for us. Yes.
Are we debt free on all the local housing corporation sites?
Local housing corporation, yes, we are. We still have some debt on the Brantford Municipal nonprofit housing as it relates to Brandland Meadows.
Now we, excuse me, you provided a pretty good chart of some comparator communities. Did you happen to notice what the debt limits are, debt ratios are for County of Brant, County of Norfolk, County of Oxford?
Through Mr. Chair, I did not take note of those for this presentation, but that's certainly something I can send back in a memo to the committee.
If you've got those in hand, if you wouldn't mind. And we often fly through the capital that's supported by water, wastewater, utility rates, and that's never really gotten the kind of a look that it's deserving from this or previous councils. And I wonder if that's something that that we're going to devote a day to. Could somebody answer that question?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's proposed that all of the capital works capital program will be discussed a week today on January the 13th with an additional date the following Monday if needed. There will be opportunity on the worksheet to stop at any individual project that you would want, and they are easily identifiable, which would be water and wastewater.
Right. Are we going to have the, it's difficult to look at that one without having the the operating budget for those divisions as well. And I'm just wondering if it might be appropriate for us to schedule a period of time to deal with that as an entire item, the capital and operating for that utility. I realize it may be partly outside of the program that we've got established, but maybe we could circulate the operating portion for that so that we can have a good look at that capital on that night with that attached. Is that possible?
Through you, Mr. Chair, staff actually is not hasn't completed its development and management review of any portion of the city's operating budget as of yet. So we wouldn't be able to bring that forward for next week now.
Okay, perhaps that's something we can do at a later date. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor McCurry. Any other members of the committee wish to speak to the presentation? Seeing none, thank you. I'm going to move on to, we're going to be looking for a mover and a seconder to put the opening motion on the floor, but I want to remind that as a reminder that no vote will be taken. The opening motion and amendments will be made throughout the 2021 Estimates Committee capital budget process, and with the final vote occurring at the last Estimates Committee capital process as amended. So the amendments will come forth. I see a mover of Councillor Van der Stelt, and I'm looking for a seconder, Councillor Weaver. Okay, thank you. Director of Finance, please provide an overview of 2A to 3A and 3B and C. Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So we are going to now get into our commission-specific capital budgets for this evening. As at step 2A on the worksheet, there is a link to the entire 2021 capital budget. If you do need to access it, I know that there's other ways you might have accessed this from the city's website, or I know that clerks set up a meeting folder for you with all the documents that pertain to the budget. But at this time, if you do need to access it, there is a link here from the worksheet as well. So we'll just move on to step 3 then, which is the Economic Development and Sanderson Center 2021 capital budget. And the committee has been provided with their proposed budget. The summary of those projects is on page 233 of your capital plan. And if you needed to get to there now, there is a hyperlink from step 3A of the worksheet. So just in summary, the capital budget that's proposed for economic development and the Sanderson Center is $215,000. It's comprised of 4 projects, again, which would be found on page 233. I think the worksheet identified that there would be a presentation of these projects, but given that there's only 4, we are just going to skip over 3B as a presentation. It wasn't warranted for the number of projects that were identified. So the chair will ask the committee members if they have any questions on any of these projects, and separate motions would be required to consider amendments to the projects that have been identified.
Thank you, Joelle. And I do have questions. First, I have Councillor Utley. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question with the LED stage lighting. What are the projected cost savings through you to staff? I see you smiling, Glenn.
Glenn Brown did appear, and then he disappeared. Are you there, Glenn? Yeah.
There he is.
Sorry, my video was cut off by the host. Sorry. Through the chair, Glenn Brown, manager of the Sanderson Center. The potential savings for the LED lighting are twofold. One is energy savings. They are far more efficient. And the second is in consumables. The LED lighting has a much longer lifespan. We don't need to be replacing the stage fixtures. They're 1,000-watt light bulbs. And we don't need to be replacing the gel, which provides the different colors for the instruments.
Glenn, is there estimated cost savings or projected cost savings?
Yes, in each of the rounds, we currently expect it to be about $1,100 in each time that we replace those instruments. So cumulatively, it's quite a bit already.
So is that $1,100
annually
over the life of the light?
That's annually.
Annually, great. That's great. That's good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next, I have Councillor Vanderstel. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Glenn, if you can reappear magically. Glenn, when was the last event, considering the COVID-related non-activities, that was held at the Sanderson Centre?
Through the chair, our last public event was on March 13th. We had a nearly sold out show by Megan Patrick. Since that time through the fall, we've done more non-audience related things like film shoots and TV specials and music videos.
And the proposed changes to the lighting, the curtain replacement, is that something that we must do this year, or can we move it into the following year with your blessing, of course, considering the lack of activity that's happening at the Sanderson due to the situation we find ourselves in now? Can we move it forward?
It is possible to defer it 1 or 2 years. The reason it's been put up this year is more to deal with the deterioration we've experienced since the last time it was flame treated following the fire in 2004. The fabric is continuing to get more brittle, and we want to replace it before the appearance is damaged too much.
Okay, thank you very much, Glenn. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderstel. Next, I have Councillor McCreary, then Councillor Weaver. Councillor McCreary, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Good to see you again, Glenn. So you can get by without it this year. We have to do it the year after for sure, though. Is that correct?
That'd be my recommendation. I wouldn't want to delay too long.
Okay, and could you reiterate what your savings are with the LED lighting for me? I thought you said $1,000 a year, but is that $1,000 per unit per year, or what exactly do you mean?
We've been replacing the LED fixtures in waves. So we do, it's a multi-year project.
Right.
So each year we do it, we find that the savings between the consumables and the energy is approximately $1,100 per year for that phase. So it starts to add up quite substantially after.
How many phases are there?
We have done. We have done 4 phases, and we have 3 more following the 2021 schedule.
Okay, so can you get by without that this year and count on it next year? Don't be afraid to say no.
The problem with delaying the replacement is that some of the fixtures we're dealing with are incandescent light sources.
Okay.
And manufacturers, due to a number of regulations in other areas, are no longer producing the light bulbs. Because,
okay, so yeah. So you want that this year for sure.
I'd worry about serviceability of the existing ones if we lose light bulbs.
Okay, and just bear with me a second now. So your minor capital items, can you explain what stage masking is?
Stage masking is our term for the drapery that you see on stage. It's a black velour that we use. We also have some specialized drapery as well.
Okay.
And so that's just to replace things that have suffered from wear and tear, mostly dance competition related.
Okay, and you're looking at $15,000 a year off to infinity by the look of it. So you're only replacing that stage masking one time. What do you do the rest of the year? The rest of the years for your capital here?
The project description is only for the 2021 budget year. We just update that each capital cycle to show what that year's projects will be.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor McCreary. Councilor Weaver.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Glenn, just a quick question for you. So beer sales. we started allowing beer sales into the theater. So do you have any comments on the amount of money that we were able to make by the additional sales of alcohol compared to any additional costs that we may have incurred for cleanup in the theater area?
Yes, I can tell you that it is a net positive. There were additional cleaning costs that were incurred, but nothing too substantial. It has certainly improved our operating results when we could do it.
Okay, thank you for that. Just wanted to check to make sure we were still on track as far as our costing with that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Weaver. Next, I have Councilor Vanderstelt, then Councilor Wall. Councilor Vanderstelt, you have the floor.
Thank you. It is my second time. Seeking a seconder, I would like to move 3C-C, the curtain replacement, into the budget, capital budget year for next year for 2022. Seeing a seconder, Councilor Antosky.
Yep, it's on the floor. Debate on the item moving 3C.
I personally don't feel any debate is necessary on the topic. Please go ahead.
See, Councilor Wall, is your hand up to speak to this item? Okay, thank you. So I'll ask the clerk to call the question on the amendment.
Through the chair, I'm just waiting for Councillor Sless and Mayor Davis to submit their votes.
I'm having trouble here, but I'm in the affirmative.
You're not muted, Councillor Sless.
There, can you hear me now?
Yes,
I'm voting in the affirmative. I'm having difficulties here with my iPad.
I am as well. And Mayor Davis's vote is in the affirmative.
The deferral of capital project 3-C carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Members of the committee voting in favor are as follows: Mayor Davis, Councillor Vanderstelt, Councillor Sless, Councillor Martin, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Wall, Councillor Weaver, Councillor Utley, Councillor McCreary, and Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you. And next in the speaking order was Councillor Wall.
Thank you, Chair Carpenter. Through the discussion, my question was answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wall. Next, I have Councillor McCreary.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I'd like to tackle 3C1 next, page 37, the Economic Development and Tourism Strategy Update. Do we have somebody, some staff that's able to answer? Oh, hi, Kevin.
Good evening, everyone. Kevin Fane, Director of Economic Development Tourism.
So our last update to the Economic Development and Tourism Strategy was 2016. We have, that was a pretty thorough document, and we've had a lot of work to do on that. Is that right?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Have we completed all our assigned tasks that we laid out?
Through the chair, I wouldn't say in its entirety, but definitely a large proportion of it.
Okay. Given the excellent performance by your staff and dedication to fulfilling what came out of the last study, Kevin, is that something that you're willing to offer up to be cut and deferred until next year, given the status of our finances and the abilities of your folks?
Through the chair, again, that's something definitely up for consideration. I will add that this strategy also encompasses the municipal cultural plan update. So it was a separate capital project, but staff rolled the both of them in together. So I know that's priority for council. So that, again, that would be delayed as well.
Yeah. So if we were to move this to the following year, it wouldn't create undue hardship?
Through the chair, no.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor McCreary. Councillor Sless.
No, I didn't have a question, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I had your hand up. It just probably didn't come down. Okay, I see no further hands up.
You're muted, Councillor Carpenter.
Sorry, yeah, I was muted, wasn't I? Got to put my hand on that button. Thank you. We're going to move on to 3D opportunities for additions.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Councilor McCurry?
I'd like to introduce an amendment now for 3C1.
Yes, go ahead.
I'd like to defer that to the following year.
Looking for a seconder. I see seconder Councilor Vanderstel. That's on the floor. Any questions or comments? Seeing no questions or comments, I'm going to call the question.
Mayor Davis, I'm just waiting for your vote.
For each vote, you're gonna have to take it from me orally because it's not coming through my e-scribe. I don't know why. But anyways, in the affirmative.
The deferral of item 3C1 to the following budget year carries on recorded vote of 8-2. Members of the committee voting in favor are as follows: Mayor Davis, Councillor Vanderstel, Councillor Sless, Councillor Martin, Councillor Wall, Councillor Weaver, Councillor McCreary, Councillor Carpenter. Members opposed, Councillor Antosky and Councillor Utley.
Thank you. And I'm moving on to 3D. Do any members of the committee wish to add anything to the proposed 21 capital program as presented in front of you? Okay, seeing none, I'll ask Joe Daniels to provide an overview of steps 4A, please. Oh, Councilor McCurry, sorry, I just saw your hand go up. Councilor McCurry first.
Mr. Chair, just a suggestion. In the last section, we sort of didn't go through it in the numeric order. I wonder if we could do as we've done in years past, and if you could just ask if anybody has questions, for instance, on 4C1, then followed by 4C2. Could we do them in order?
I find it's quicker if we just simply go through whichever one anybody wants to speak to. You can go in order if you want, or not.
Okay, it's just that it's tougher to follow along if you're not in order.
I'll consider that for the next time, but this, we only have 11 items on the next budget and 4 on this one. So the lengthy ones, we may have to work that way. Thank you. Okay, Joel, go ahead, please.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So moving on now to step 4 of the worksheet, which is the corporate services capital budget for 2021. A summary of these projects can be found on page 234 of the worksheet, and you can use the link, the electronic link on the worksheet to access those projects if you need to. The corporate services capital budget totals $1,685,000 with a total of 11 projects. And there is going to be a brief presentation provided on the corporate services capital plan.
Okay, are you going forward with your presentation?
Yes, I was just making sure my cohorts were on the call as well. So we do have projects expanding the finance department as well as the human resources department and the IT department. So I'll start off the presentation. Thank you to members of the committee. Next slide, please. So the directors for each of these areas, we're going to tag team on this presentation here. But I'll start with finance as far as our capital highlights for the 2021 capital program. So for finance, the 2021 capital budget for us has really been developed with an active eye to the KPMG service review opportunities. So improving functionality in our CRM, our customer relationship management system, to handle customer inquiries, supports service opportunity number 1 of that report, which was to provide improvements to the customer service framework. And another one I'd like to highlight is the potential review for a corporate-wide fees and charges review, including the development of a citywide fee policy and guidelines with respect to the setting of fees, which also ties in nicely to service review opportunity number 5 with respect to review of the Parks and Rec user fees and charges. Anita?
Thank you, Joelle. Anita Solke, Director of Human Resources through the Estimates Committee Chairperson. With respect to human resources, there are 2 key capital plan submissions for 2021. The first one deals with the Human Resources Master Plan, which would be fulfilling a key mandate of the Human Resources Committee. And it also covers an item from the KPMG service review opportunity, similar to the finance area that is also drawing from that particular document. The second capital plan is to implement a staff engagement program, and that is also required for implementation of the service review opportunities. And those are the 2 items that are being submitted from Human Resources. Over to you, Scott.
Thanks, Anita. Good evening, everyone. Scott Hall, Director of IT Services, through you, Mr. Chair. When preparing our capital budget for 2021, we felt it was important to highlight some of the factors that we considered when selecting the IT projects we're presenting this evening. The first is really trying to keep the momentum going. We want to continue to build on our recent successes with business process improvements, finding efficiencies, automating tasks, and integrating systems. The digital transformation project, which was the employee onboarding process, is a perfect example of a very successful collaborative effort between HR and IT, for which the city received 3 awards. The new process replaced 72 steps of manual creation in our payroll system with a single click, button click, and has saved over 3,000 hours and an estimated 200,000 annually in staff time. And this system went live in February of 2020. The second factor was looking at what products and required funding was necessary to help us achieve council's priorities and goals and further support the implementation of identified service and business review opportunities. When, for example, creating a digital city by leveraging technology was identified as a top opportunity, and 2020 reinforced the need even more so. It was also suggested as an organization we need to enhance the online service offerings, improve efficiency and service delivery with technology, and improve our internal processes. While work's already underway to address some of the recommendation, there are others that require capital funding for software and/or services to make them possible. Last, we have business continuity, really ensuring we continue to focus on security, data protection, and disaster recovery. These are necessary and fundamental to any IT operation, and require funding to support the technologies and services necessary to help us keep our systems, up and running. Next slide.
Thanks. So when we look at future capital challenges and goals, when we look at finance, it's really about future enhancements, specifically implementation of software that will allow us to continue to improve and streamline our manual processes. So for an example, we want to look at continuing to build on solutions that we've implemented in 2020, such as expanding the online invoicing and payment options for the public that we introduced rather quickly as part of COVID, but it opens the door for a number of new efficiency improvements in the future. Anita?
Thank you, Joelle. Within human resources, in terms of our future capital challenges and goals, we're looking at replacing or implementing new software to support our learning management and our electronic employee files. On the learning management side, particularly in 2020, we've really leveraged our online training modules. It has become crucial to deliver training online rather than in person, particularly with the COVID pandemic. And it provides us an opportunity to offer online learning on a regular basis without having to do it within a classroom setting per se. At any given time, we have approximately 1,300 to 1,500 employees. That's a lot of employee files. Many of them have been with us for a long period of time, and those paper files go on for a long time, and they're quite large in some cases. So we will be moving them all over to this new City Hall, but we know that there are electronic employee file systems out there that we'd like to be able to take advantage of moving forward as part of the IT initiative as well, in terms of the digital transformation. The other aspect of human resources is our compensation reviews. We need to be able to support our pay equity legislative compliance, and we need to ensure that our pay practices attract and retain employees. And that goes hand in hand with the HR master plan. That would also be looking at the compensation pay practices, and will get us in good stead as far as our next round of collective bargaining. Over to you, Scott.
Thanks, Anita. For IT services, really just a couple points that I want to speak to. The first is specific to the security platform capital project that we're recommending. Having a cybersecurity plan is essential to our organization. It provides the recommendations and best practices to help us protect our environment and corporate information. Often these recommendations will include managed or hosted services, technologies, process changes, training, and/or additional resources. The plan will be very dynamic, reviewed and adjusted annually to allow the flexibility to adapt to changing external and internal risks. Once the plan is developed, we'll have a better appreciation for the funding required in subsequent years to support and achieve the plan. Next is competing priorities and demand on resources, being able to move forward with departmental and corporate initiatives at the same time as being able to achieve initiatives and priorities that are fundamental to IT operations. 2020 was a year unlike any other for IT, and 2021 is ramping up to be a very busy and significant year for IT as well. The move to the new City Hall, building and migrating the new data center, and firing up an entirely new network infrastructure are huge for us. We're actively procuring technology to support the work from home model, and there are a number of projects underway or soon will be that require our services and support. A key finding of a recent survey that just crossed my desk actually last week showed that 3,400 IT decision makers, when surveyed, said that COVID-19 raised the profile of IT within their organizations, essentially causing IT to be viewed more strategically in their organizations. We believe the accomplishments of 2020 and plans for 2021 combined will help support this finding. We have a very capable and dedicated team within IT, and I can guarantee you we will be working hard to support the organization, but we're all about managing expectations and competing priorities and demand for the same resources, people, and budget will be challenging. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall.
Next slide. Sorry, just very briefly, this overview ties in to the worksheet, just quickly highlighting the total cost of the program for corporate services is $1,685,000, which represents 1.9% of the total citywide capital program. Next slide, please. So just to look at the projects in a bit more detail, I'll start with finance. The first project that we've put forward for 2021 is a review of the city fees and charges. This was something that came out of the finance committee and was approved by council that we present this project to the estimates committee for consideration. So the service review opportunities speak to the need for Parks and Rec fee review. But you know, it is evident every year as we go through our annual fee setting process that many staff struggle with setting fees. And in our discussions with the finance committee, you know, in all fairness, the city does lack a comprehensive policy and set of guidelines to inform this process. So in many cases, it's unclear what the full cost of providing the service is, or to what degree the fees should cover the costs, and the threshold for which an increase maybe could be borne without impacting the demand for that service. So staff does strongly feel that there are gains that could be made through a review of this type, and that opportunities to fairly and defensively increase user fees to offset the tax levy do exist. The second project we put forward is a state of good repair project, which is simply a replacement of our meter reading hardware. This is hardware that is at end of life, is necessary for our utility meter reading, and it is funded from the rate reserves. And the last project is updates to the corporate CRM, customer relation management system. Again, this project supports a very high ranking KPMG service opportunity. Implementation of this software will allow for easier issue tracking and handling, easier integration with other systems, and easier use on mobile devices. Anita? I think you're on mute.
Sorry, thank you. The first capital project that is being submitted by Human Resources is the new HR Human Resources Master Plan. It needs to be refreshed. It was approved by City Council on January 27, 2014. It was a strategic planning document that provided direction regarding the various areas of focus to be pursued over a 5 to 7 year period. That period has now ended. Staff have completed approximately 90% now, actually, since the submission had been made of the 60 activities and some sub-activities that had been submitted as part of the HR Master Plan. The KPMG report on the service review opportunities, number 87, had recommended that there be a review of the compensation negotiation process, looking at outsourcing labor negotiations, collective agreement working conditions, the compensation system, including the bonus system and overtime policies. And there was also a service review opportunity to implement an HR plan that would attract and retain the right talent and increase retention of skilled labor. All of that is critical to the organization with respect to the human resources, the people, the staff that implement all of the recommendations that council puts forward on behalf of their constituents. The second capital plan submission is with respect to an employee engagement program. That would be $50,000. That would be the upset limit. We would be looking at doing a low value quote submission for this particular capital plan. Typically, employee engagement programs are conducted over an 18 to 24 month period. The first part of the program is to prepare and design the questions, and then to actually conduct an employee engagement survey, communicate the results, and then critical to the success of an employee engagement program is to implement the actual recommendations and the feedback that was provided by staff, and then to follow up on those actions to see whether there has been improvement. So this would be something that would take the next couple of years in order to actually implement, and as indicated, it was a KPMG service review opportunity recommendation as well. Over to you, Scott.
Thanks, Anita. Next slide, please. So the first project I want to touch on is the electronic signatures. This project is about improving internal processes and eliminating paperwork and improved customer service by reducing the need for in-person signing of by offering simplified online forms and applications to our residents, business owners, and developers, essentially anyone interacting with the city. The implementation of electronic signatures has been identified by both staff and KPMG to support the move to a digital city. Funding for this project will allow us to purchase the service that best meets the needs of the organization moving forward and start a phased approach to implementing the technology. Many applications require multiple signatures, not unlike the purchase of a home, and the technology combined with the ability to create workflows would support the collection of signatures to complete the submission. This requirement has limited our ability to automate certain applications and provide this as an online service to date. The next is security platform. As previously mentioned, we're looking to engage a security consulting firm to develop a cybersecurity plan that will allow us to focus on mitigation of high priority risks while providing a roadmap for continual improvement of our security posture. The capital funding will cover the cost of a cybersecurity plan and will allow us to start implementation of the recommendations. And this project is associated with the business continuity that I mentioned previously. The next project is the time and attendance system. So just to give a little background, in 2017, 2018, a team of finance, HR, and IT issued an RFP and selected workforce software as the city's new time and attendance system. This project began in late 2019 with an information technology funded budget of about $600,000. To date, a portion of the project is being configured with the go live target date in March 2021 for about 60% of the staff. The time and attendance system is being used to collect a variety of data, including equipment time and several highly complex holiday and overtime agreements within the 10 city collective bargaining units. The city project team has been working alongside the vendor to achieve the progress to date by assisting with the development and testing of these policy profiles, which are associated with each of the collective agreements. The remaining 40% of the configuration is outstanding, and we require the funding to cover the vendor's time to build the remaining profiles, which is an estimated additional 2,000 hours. The complexity of replacing 11 years of worth of custom software programming has been challenging for both the city and the vendor. The next project is our replication and disaster recovery. Simply put, our current backup hardware is nearing end of life and we need to replace it with current technology. The project will cover some of the costs of new hardware, upgraded software licensing, and implementation services. These changes will improve performance and reduce recovery times. The next PC replacement program, this is an annual request that I think most of you are quite familiar with at this point, but the PC program allows us to allows the city departments to remain current with laptops and desktops that are both efficient and supported by our vendors. Older computers and pose the security risks to us as they cannot support current software versions and often cannot be patched. They're often also slower and impact staff productivity. So we've reduced the budget ask for this year primarily due to the rollout of upwards of 400 laptops to support the work from home model, some of which will replace existing desktops that would have either been replaced or upgraded. And lastly is the Integrate Applications and Data project. This project focuses on the data that's stored within the variety of applications used throughout the organization and identifies opportunities to integrate what would otherwise be disparate systems. It strives to improve the quality and accuracy of the data by reducing double entry or manual entry of information. Integration between systems is typically possible with interfaces made available by the software vendor. In some cases, these services are included as part of the solution, and other cases they need to be purchased separately. The funding allocated to this project will cover the cost of purchasing the integration tools for such software packages as Amanda, in addition to tools for developing and managing our enterprise data model. Foundation projects like this one are what make it possible for us to achieve the integrations required as part of the business process improvements and efficiency recommendations, such as those associated with the digital city. And I think that brings us to the end. Next slide. That's it.
Thank you. And I do have a number of questions, and I've decided to take Councilor McCurry up on his suggestions. I'm going through them one at a time on the items. But this is questions on the presentation that was put before us. And I have Councilor Martin, you are first, you have the floor.
Thank you. One of the items was meter replacement. And in the full capital budget, there's two items that are related. One is a pilot program for smart meter reading and water meter replacement program. Are these connected in such that the meters that are being replaced are part of the pilot program?
No, we haven't started with the pilot project yet. We're just, we have issued the RFPs, and that is a separate project. But we are hoping that the new meter reading equipment will kind of serve as a stopgap until we get the smart metering project up and running. So we do definitely need this new meter reading equipment before the end of the year, because it is at end of life and it's not being supported, and there are, you know, the equipment needs parts to be made operable, and the parts aren't even available. So we absolutely have to replace that hardware. So they are separate projects, but we're hoping that the equipment that we purchase will be able to kind of hold us over until we get the smart meeting project up and running. Does that make sense?
Not really, because if we're replacing a system just to replace it again in short order, it seems like a waste of money.
Well, no. So the smart reading project is only a pilot for 2021, and we haven't even started it. So it's a longer range project, and it only will address, you know, a small percentage of our customers, about 2,000 of our customers, whereas the remaining, you know, 32,000 customers, we still have to continue to read until we get a full-fledged smart metering system in place, if council does approve that further on. So currently we just have approval for the pilot for our commercial industrial customers. And we hope to have that pilot in place for 2021 at some point, but we still will have to continue to read our other customers until until we go ahead with the full smart metering project once council approves that full project. So, and that would take probably at least 3 to 4 years, depending on which approach would be taken. So we definitely need this equipment, regardless of whether we decide to go eventually with a smart metering project down the road.
What is the life expectancy of this equipment that we're buying?
Typically, they last about 5 years. So the current equipment is about 5 years old, and it is at end of life. It's no longer supported.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor Martin. I have Councilor Vanderstelt, Antosky, Utley, and McCurry. Councilor Vanderstelt, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Carpenter. I'll try to be brief. Mr. Hall, Scott Hall, just wondering, can you give us an example of your most recent or most significant disaster recovery experience?
So for us, we've been fortunate, knock on wood, that we haven't had any major disaster recovery initiative over the last, gosh, I can't even remember the last one would have been. The bulk of the recoveries for us are recovering files that may have been accidentally deleted, removed, that sort of thing, versus a full-fledged disaster recovery effort.
Okay, so when files go missing or were removed inadvertently or whatever, that comes at an additional cost to the city, does it not? I mean, if we're suddenly missing files, which we used to have on file, that can become a legal problem, no?
That can become a legal program. Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. That can become a legal program, but with the backup systems and solutions we have in place, being able to recover those quite expediently is what we can do. So there's not a significant cost, but if those were not recoverable and those were key business files that need to be recovered, then that can be a whole nother issue, trying to do those.
So this is how we back up our IT services.
This is how we back up and make sure everything on all the servers are there for recovery should something drastic happen.
Right. Okay. Thank you. One additional question, Joelle. Will we be including the non-resident user fee potential increase along with our review of fees and charges?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is something that we can incorporate as part of the scope of work for the consultant. I see Brian online here as well.
Yes, we talked about that with Indy, the general manager of Public Works as well, and Brian Hughes, and try to incorporate the two together.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Vanderstelt. Councilor Antosky, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Did you say that you were going to go through each individual item?
Yes, I was going to take Councilor McCurry up on his suggestion and go through each item and then come back for amendments.
Okay, I can wait because it's specific to one of the items. Thank you.
Okay, to the presentation, Councilor Utley.
Mr. Chair, I have a question regards 4C10. Do you want to wait until we get down to that?
Yes, unless you want to ask something about the presentation.
Oh, I can wait. Thank you.
Councilor McCurry, you have the floor. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, thank you. With respect to 4C1, am I to understand that this will enable us to determine exactly what our costs are and therefore establish our user fees based upon our costs, knowing what those costs are?
Through Mr. Chair, certainly looking at how we would calculate and develop a full cost recovery model for those services that would warrant a fee that's based on a full cost recovery would be part of that work, yes.
So at the conclusion of this work, someone would be able to conclusively tell me how much it costs us to create an hour of ice time at the Wayne Gretzky Sports Center?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's quite specific. I can't say that certainly right now that's what will come out of this, but we would be looking for a consultant to assist us with that and in developing an equitable rate for services that would cover the full cost of providing that service where warranted.
Okay, so let me be more pointed. Unless we're going to have this consultant establish what our costs are, it's a quite useless exercise that will cost the taxpayers $150,000. What I'm looking at and what I'm hearing, I believe someone said earlier that this would allow us to create fairly and defensively some increased fees to offset our hunger for tax dollars. But I don't mean to be combative, but I don't see how we can, if all we're going to do is look at other communities and then whack our prices up to meet their prices, I think this is not only a disservice to the community, but a waste of $150K. We always seize upon sports as one of our fees and charges, Joelle. What other fees and charges are we going to be looking at?
Through Mr. Chair, we are looking to do a comprehensive citywide user fee. So it would exclude water wastewater because that's going to be an independent fee study that would be done separate from this process. But our user fee bylaw schedules includes a number of other fees, largely in the public works area. So for engineering, such as parking and landfill and all kinds of operational service types of initiatives for street cut restorations, items such as that, likely transit. Finance does have fees. Pardon?
Okay, no, that's
planning. Yes.
Yeah, right. Okay, so no, that's a sufficient list, Joelle. Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, after the discussion, if you come back to me, I'll have an amendment to move.
Thank you. Any more discussion on the presentations before I move to 4C, the capital projects themselves? Now, taking up Councillor McCurry's suggestion, I'd like to go through each one at a time. That doesn't preclude members of the committee from coming back and speaking to any one of them out of order. If something comes up after we've moved on, we don't vote on them here. And then when we get through to item 11, then we will go back to see if there's any amendments on any of them or any further discussion. I know that in the past I've found that some members' suggestions of members of council, I've had time to think about what they've said, and I've come up with some other ideas afterwards, and we've moved on with that item. So in light of that, this will give us a little more opportunity as council move forward. So I'm going to move forward with any comments on item 1, 4C1. Councilor McCurry. And remember, we're going to discuss these, then come back for amendments. Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I'll just go back in the queue and come back to me when everybody else is finished.
Thank you. Councillor Sless.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Carpenter. The example that Councillor McCreary indicated to you, Joelle, was ice time. And if we're looking at full cost recovery, that's one thing. But then I think we also have to look at market. I'm not sure how you do this study. There's a number of factors that go into some groups get grants that offset their costs. Like there's a whole lot of things. Is that part of the comprehensive review? And then going a step further, do we then go out to the market? If we do I'll just keep using ice time because it's simple. If we're charging $100 an hour for ice time and we find out the full cost recovery would be $200 an hour, and then we look at all our surrounding communities and they're all charging $75 an hour, we obviously can't go to full cost recovery. How do we make those decisions? Like, I'm not sure what information you would get back.
Through Mr. Chair. So we do want to have an independent consultant look at the services that we provide. We do want them to provide best practices as far as how these fees are typically calculated. So when we look at full cost recovery, as an example, some services will want to perhaps recover the full cost because we aren't now and other municipalities are. In other cases, we still may want to know what the full cost of providing that service is, but maybe it's not warranted normally that we would want to collect a full fee, or maybe the full fee would discourage people from using that service, which would result in declining revenues. It's really a very comprehensive what we're going to be asking this consultant to do. And when you look at full fee recovery, is it the direct costs? Is it the indirect costs that are included in that as well? And we don't have the policies or guidelines established here at the city to assist staff in evaluating that when necessarily for all services when they're looking at costing their fees. So, full cost recovery is just one item we'll want to consider in setting the fees. Others will be setting a fee that would allow for demand, or where we could increase a fee without affecting demand to put a little bit less pressure on the tax levy. So there's a number of components that we're going to be wanting looked at in an effort for us to better defend our fees and likely be able to provide some justification for increasing them as well where warranted.
Okay, thanks, Joelle.
I have Councilor McCurry down for questions or comments. We're going to move amendments after we've gone through all the items and had questions or comments, and then we'll move amendments if that's okay. Councilor McCurry, or do you want me to come back later? You have, yes. Okay, thank you.
Yes, please.
Yeah, the logic there is a little bit of a twist on what we've been doing. If the committee is okay, it just allows members of the committee to think further on items we've discussed while we're moving down to other items, and then we can come back for amendments on any ones that you like, starting with C1, of course. All right, so any more comments on C1, comments or questions? Okay, moving on to C2, Human Resources Plan. Members of the committee wish to ask any questions on that? I don't see any hands up at this point. Okay, C3, Employee Engagement Program. I see Councilor McCurry and Councilor McCurry. Councilor.
Mr. Chair, I was too slow. I did want to look at the Human Resources Master Plan update. If you'll just give me a second.
C2, go ahead, Councilor McCurry.
Just give me a second to find the page here. Okay, so we have a Human Resources Master Plan, which we embarked upon a couple of years ago. Have we completed all that work that was outlined in the master plan?
Through the chair, Anita Swolke, Human Resources, we've completed probably about 90 to 95% of the HR master plan that had been approved in 2014.
Okay, so we've got one, you're looking at hoping to get funding for this year for one, and then the next one would be in 2028. In as much as we haven't completed our 2014 approval, can we make do with pushing this out into 2022?
Through the chair, if that is council's wishes, through the estimates committee, we could certainly defer it for another year. The Human Resources Department has enough on its work plan. We would be certainly willing to add this on, but if council wishes to defer it, we'll follow through with that.
You sure you got enough work otherwise, Anita, to keep you busy?
We sure do.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor McCreary. Any more questions or comments on this item? Moving on to item 3, Human Resources Employee Engagement Program. Any members of the committee wish to speak to that item? This doesn't preclude you from speaking to it later as we get down further. Seeing none, I'm going to move forward to the electronic signature. And, I see Councilor Toski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Scott, you may have heard one of the delegations asking, you know, why is this so expensive, 75,000? Why can't we just use Adobe? Probably a lot of people would ask that, not understanding the complexity of multiple signatures and combining the forms. But I'm wondering if maybe you could probably could elaborate on that for all of us.
Sure, no problem. Through you, Mr. Chair. What we've done to this point is we've started to look at the various technologies that support digital signatures and electronic signatures. Adobe is certainly one of the platforms that we've looked at. There's systems like Consigno, Notorious, DocuSign, all of which have their pluses and minuses. And what we want to do is take a deep dive, understand the full requirements of the organization, and see where there's fit that is better with one than others. The costs range considerably. So I know a neighboring municipality, although larger than us, they're paying $150,000 a year over the next 3 years for electronic signatures. There is functionality within Adobe, for example, that would allow for simple signing of documents like journal entries and those types of things within internal documents. But certainly there are those which require the legal, the purchasing, the finance type contracts where you need that signature, you need that certificate of authenticity, that certificate of completion, the kinds of things that come with some of the higher end e-signature programs. And then looking at that, there are some that are certified by AMO as well. And, you know, we need to take those into consideration, and we have, and we're looking at those. But at the end of the day, a big component for us is that multiple signature, like you spoke to. We need the software that allows for that workflow that says when that document is signed to person A, they sign it. When it gets signed, the workflow and the intelligence behind it says now sign it to person B, then on to person C. Not all platforms have that same level of sophistication. They all vary. Certainly, if we can find a solution that does everything for a lower cost, and if Adobe, you know, comes out on top, that will be the approach we take. We're not discounting anything at this point. We just want to make sure that we have a solution that's going to allow us to integrate with our online forms to be able to take those signatures, but also be able to handle the PDFs and documents that way. Hopefully that answers.
That's great. Thank you, Scott. I think probably part of the answer too is just that even if we went with another more recognizable, you know, for Adobe, I will use as an example, it's still going to, you know, be a significant cost just because of the complexity that's needed for the city. It's a lot different than what we might use personally.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. The ability to use Adobe to set up your own digital certificate and to sign that way, that is essentially what is there for free. The Adobe Sign product, which is, you know, the part that allows you to set up all those documents and set up all the workflows and everything else, there's a cost to that.
That's helpful. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Councilor Toski. Councilor McCreary on 4C.
Mr. Chair, thank you. We've gotten by without this till now, is that correct?
We have gotten by without it, but there are certain initiatives like the development process, a lot of the planning, a lot of the building type applications that we looked at trying to build during the web project and trying to enhance those online services that require those multiple signatures, the developers, the banks, the lawyers, which we'd like to be able to automate those and we just don't have the ability to do that.
Is that one of the items that was, is that one of the items that was highlighted in the final report to the red tape committee?
There's definitely was one of the items was looking at the whole development review process.
Okay, what's the annualized cost going to be?
Right now, because we're just looking at a pilot project, we've basically, I think, identified about 20,000, and that's just to kind of get things going. We'll have a better idea once we move forward and see what the needs are after the pilot's completed.
Okay, so let me back up here now. So what you're looking at for 75,000 in 2021 is a pilot project?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, what we've done is we've started to meet with departments and get a handle on how many documents they use today. The number that we're hearing back is quite substantial, but we believe a lot of those documents are some of those internal type documents. As I mentioned, the price varies anywhere from like $1, $20, $30 per document or per envelope, as I refer to it, upwards of up to $11 per document. So until we complete that evaluation and find the solution that meets our needs, I had to at least put in a budget that would account for those more costly systems as well if they do come to the top.
Okay, so can you be clear in terms of exactly what the $75,000 pays for in 2021?
So the $75,000 will cover approximately 30 to 40,000 documents internally at the low end of approximately around $1.40 to the $2 range. We're feeling pretty confident that the solutions that we've looked at so far can be done at that price range. So you multiply that out per document, and that's going to get you pretty close to that 75,000.
So are you saying that we're going to be subscribing to a service then that's going to charge us per use?
The services, this is where it gets tricky. Some services charge per use, but some have enterprise licensing that allow you to handle documents internally at no cost. So there are some services that allow X number of document authors, if you will, to be able to, those who create the documents that create the workflows to send those documents out. It's a complicated type environment, and we're, like I said, we're just trying to get our head wrapped around it right now. And from the research that we've seen, we do know that at least per document, there is going to be that cost moving forward for those that we definitely need this for.
Has council seen a report come to us outlining this and seeking permission to go ahead with it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the motivating factor for us was identified internally, and it was further supported by the KPMG report and the recommendation to leverage technology to support a digital city. They specifically within that report strongly urge that we adopt an electronic signature.
So that would be a no?
Not a report from us, just the KPMG report.
Okay, the KPMG report went into no detail on this whatsoever. I'm a bit concerned that we're writing a blank check here to start with for 75K. But thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all my comments.
Okay, perfect timing for your 3 minutes. I was going to come back to you. Councillor Wall, you're next on 4C.
Thank you, Chair Carpenter. Okay, I'm so confused about this whole electronic signature thing. So do we use electronic signatures now? And who do we use?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we don't currently use an electronic signature application. There are some staff that are using Adobe for essentially going in and using the fill and form and placing a signature on a document. But
so I have limited time, so we're not using one except for something that people are kind of hobbling together.
That's correct.
Second, if some big developer or contractor or lawyer or architect firm or whatever was dealing with the city, odds are they'd have an electronic signature form. They would send the paperwork with the electronic signatures to us. But we are using electronic signatures now, right? Like if somebody needed you to sign a document, they could send you a link, you could click it and do an electronic signature.
That's correct. I could register a signature for that purpose.
Next question. So just this morning, I was dealing with an organization through my career that doesn't accept electronic signatures. They actually insisted that we print copies and sign it and paper it. For whatever reason, they don't use electronic signatures in their organization. We'll still have to use paper every now and then, but this will significantly cut down on paper usage if we don't have to be printing and signing things. Yes?
That's correct.
Is it somewhere in here? Like, can you like weigh that? So it's like, by paying $75,000 for this software, we're going to save $50,000 in paper and ink costs? Like, is that?
At this point, with the research that we've done in preparation for this report, I don't have those numbers. It's certainly something that we can go back and try to put together.
Well, imagine somebody printing a document like 20, 30, 40 times just to get signatures. Okay, final question. We're government. I know we're just municipal government, but like, isn't this something that they have to figure out? Like, not just for municipalities, but for the province and for the federal government? Like, is there not talk between IT circles, between us and the provincial and the federal government for a proprietary electronic signature software that allows government officials to be able to have signatures done securely? Like, why are we all having to piecemeal our own little solution? I know that'll have a cost, but I mean, shouldn't there be like an official government of Canada secure signature software? Is that even a thing?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would certainly appreciate if that was there. I think the challenge is there are competing technologies. The best I can tell you is that we know of one vendor that we're looking at, Notorious, that was adopted and recommended by AMO. And that's one particular solution. That would be a good fit for us as well. But I can tell you that another large municipality went a completely different stream. So there is a lot of discussion at the provincial level, from what I understand, around digital signatures. But you know, everybody seems to be, at least from what I understand, going their own route and choosing what's the best fit for them.
So I support electronic signatures, but I would really appreciate being able to see an approximate cost saving that it would. This is going to save us money. I know that it is. It saves me money in my personal life being able to do electronic signatures, not just printing costs, but time used to print. It takes forever to print a 100-page document when you could do it as a PDF and hit a signature. So if we could find a way to show that this is not actually a $75 expenditure, but actually a $50,000 save, you know what I mean? Like, the savings are there. I'd like to see them because, okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor Wall. Councillor Martin, you have the floor.
Is this something that's needed to facilitate the work from home model that council approved?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it would certainly help the work from home with the electronic signatures. Some staff are still coming in to sign documents because they need those physical signatures on them. But you know, we've managed through 9 months at this point by using just our own signatures and putting them onto documents. So we've managed so far, but I know there's definitely a push within some of the other departments that need those more those certificates of authenticity and certificates of completion on those documents, which we don't get with what we're doing today.
Okay, so this will certainly help with the work from home model then, and not require employees to drive in just to sign something.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Toski, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Following up on Councillor Martin's statements, this is more than possible cost savings. This is customer service, and I'm wondering if by not particularly during COVID, but maybe moving forward, by not having electronic signatures, are we delaying some of our development projects? Like, I'm thinking about signatures that we need from city, from lawyers, from developers, from contractors, from whatever, consultants. And I look at, for instance, real estate often uses DocuSign. They can send one copy to me, they can send it to my partner, they all get consolidated to get in. None of us had to go anywhere. Are we suffering any holdups on any of our projects because of not being able to gather, not being able to go places, and needing to have physical signatures?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm glad you brought that point up with the customer service, because that's really the driving factor for us during COVID, is trying to do more online and reduce the need for even a developer who lives out of town to have to come in to physically put a signature on an application form. When we first looked at developing a lot of or automating a lot of the online forms that we have self-serve on CityNet, or sorry, not CityNet, on the website brantford.ca today, we had a number of applications that were submitted to us in IT to review, and we simply could not do them with the technology that we had access to today. The technology that we have access to and we're using today allows for one signature. Until we have a software platform that will allow us to integrate multiple signatures, that's totally, that will allow us to put those online and move forward. Now, that being said, those at the same time, there are projects and opportunities with the development review process that we'll be looking at some opportunities there as well. But yes, it has held us up from moving forward with some of those applications.
Well, and I think even post-COVID, it's good customer service and not having everybody to drive everywhere for a signature. So thanks for the explanation, Scott.
Thank you, Councillor Antosky. Councillor Vanderstel and Mayor Davis, and then Councillor Weaver. Councillor Vanderstel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Carpenter. Scott, you're not on the hot seat, trust me. I have a difficult time trying to put together the math here. So you said between $1, $2, $3, and sometimes $11 for an actual hard copy signature. E-signature could be the cost going forward, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that's the wide range that we've seen from the different vendors at this point.
And how many of the vendors are in the $11 category?
Through you, Mr. Chair, one. And
okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and that pricing varies depending on the number of documents we subscribe to. So right. If we like that vendor and we only want to use 10,000 documents, the price is going to be higher. As we add more documents, the price goes down.
Okay. Every business supports this. Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderstel. Mayor Davis. You're muted.
There. Thank you, Chair, and through you. A little bit of perspective on this, because many of these agreements I'm asked to sign on behalf of the city, and Scott's quite right. You can get into an agreement that requires 10 signatures, and just think of it, if it's a hard copy, and I dealt with this all the time in the legal industry. So now I sign it. Now it's got to be sent by courier to the developer. They sign it. They send it to the bank by courier, and it keeps going around. And before you know it, how much you spend in courier fees, and then also the length of time it takes to go through the chain. And it can take 2 to 3 weeks to get a complicated development document signed if it's hard copy. And so, Scott's quite right. There are programs that allow for that to happen, the multi-signatory agreements, so they can be signed very quickly electronically at very minimal cost compared to courier fees. And also the time it takes. You can get the agreement signed and in place not within weeks, but potentially within days. So it really is a time and cost saver, makes things much simpler. It's in accordance with our red tape committee, which is to simplify and expedite development agreements and building permits and that sort of thing. So there's a lot to be commended for this. And I think Scott's told us that, this is a budget allocation and it's not the final amount. It may be that what's actually spent is a lot less. And like any other budget item, it's an estimate based on, what they believe the cost will be. And then of course, they'll follow the city's procurement purchasing policy to obtain the best price for the program that best works for. And you got to realize, I think you all appreciate just how complicated it is, the number of agreements the city signs, not just development agreements, but agreements that purchase agreements with other municipalities, stakeholders, etc. So it's a kind of a no-brainer to me that we need it to be in line with what many of our customers, ratepayers, and those we're dealing with, whether they're developers, builders, banks, etc., expect of a modern city. So it's an easy one for me to vote on, that's for sure, given the experience I have both as a lawyer and as mayor, having to sign a lot of hard copy documents. That's frankly just a waste of time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have three more on the list: Councillor Weaver, Councillor Wall, and Councillor McCurry. Councillor Weaver, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Carpenter. Scott, just want to say you did an excellent job presenting and answering the questions. You won me over. So I do plan on supporting this. And here's a couple examples of things that I've had to come into the city to sign. So as the social service chair, you become basically the de facto president of the city's housing corporation. And if the city is going to be selling any of those properties, you're required to go into City Hall and sign all those documents. So that's a great reason. All the other reasons that have been stipulated, I think, are reasons why we should be supporting this. And I just have one question. I'm not sure who it would go to, so I'll ask it, and hopefully either the clerk or maybe Scott or maybe Brian can answer. If we do this, is this going to allow our mayor to do digital signatures on all the bylaws he has to sign at the end of every council meeting to make it quicker for everybody? Or do we still have to sit around and watch him sign? Just a question.
Through the chair, we'd have to address that through our records retention process, and whether or not when we move to the electronic records management system. So for the time being, he'll still have to physically sign those bylaws.
Okay, well, when the time comes, I'll be happy to assist with the resolution if need be, or just to move this forward. So, so thank you very much for that, Chris, and good answering the question, Scott. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Weaver. Councillor McCurry.
And Chris answered in the affirmative. I would have supported this wholeheartedly. Scott, is there a corresponding line in the operating budget for this?
There is a line of 20,000 ongoing if this is approved to move forward.
That's in the 2021 budget, 2021 operating?
That's correct. And impact that would hit for 2022.
Sorry, is there a $21,000 item in the operating budget for this item?
No, not for this operating year, 2021.
Okay.
No.
So in 2022, what will the impact be on the operating budget?
We're anticipating 20,000 based on the research we've done to date.
Does that include, is that in addition to a 75,000 in capital next year?
No, that is separate from the capital request.
Okay, I'm really having a hard time now understanding exactly what's lying ahead of us. So we're spending 75,000 this year on capital approximately, right?
That's correct.
And that is to purchase on a unit price basis signatures?
On a unit-based process, search signatures, that's correct.
Okay, so 75,000 this year, and that number drops to 21 next year?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's kind of what we estimated. It's really going to depend on what sort of a deal or an arrangement we can make with that vendor. I'm hoping that we can do it within the 20,000. That's kind of what we've worked out. We'll know better once we go through this assessment and see what the actual costs are. If the actual costs come in at we don't need to spend the 75,000 that we've estimated, then we'll be in good situation.
Okay, and could you just, for my peace of mind, why would we spend 75 this year and 20 next year? If we're going to, and one would only think that as we roll this out, other departments are going to sign on to it, so to speak, if not to, stretch the pun too much. Why would you anticipate that our costs would decline in year two?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not necessarily indicating that I think the costs will decline. Depending with the subscription services and some of the ways we've been going, If there are additional funds, then we apply those to offset the costs for operating in subsequent years. If how can I try to describe this? If we move forward, and I'm trying to think how I can word this so it's clear. I'm struggling with how to try to simplify this, because I totally can understand where you're coming from, saying, okay, you're spending 75,000 to do this, but you're wanting 20,000 in subsequent years to keep on doing that. This is really still a pilot within some of the departments to get them going. As we tend to adopt, much like other software solutions, we will purchase additional licenses. In this case, we would have purchased additional documents. So from a 10,000 to a 20,000 to a 30,000 document level. So at that point, we would come forward through our operating budget to account for that increase as we start to roll out and implement this further within the organization.
Thank you. I think it would be to our best interest to have a report come to council on this as well. Scott, I appreciate your efforts to answer questions today, but for every one asked, I've got another one in my head. So could you arrange to have a report come to us in the February cycle, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I will do so.
Thank you.
Thank you. And on 4C, I have nobody else in the queue. I want to ask one quick question, if I may, Scott. What is the authentication process for the actual signatures? Is there a process for that to verify that signature is actually the person that is saying they are?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. There, with some of the more sophisticated programs, you go through a more exhaustive process to confirm that you are indeed the person who has that key or that certificate. And then there's passwords associated with that to confirm every time you go to sign that you have the credentials to be able to use that. That's the benefit of them being able to provide that certificate of authenticity, because of the measures they take to verify you are who you say you are.
Thanks, Scott. When that report comes forward to the committee, could you also include some kind of a legal comment from our legal department about how this will work and the verification of it? Thank you. Moving on to for 5C, security platform. Any comments on security platform? Waiting for some signatures to come up. Hands. Oh, I see one. Councilor McCurry.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Just bear with me until I get on the right page here. Thank you very much for this. As usual, your language is beyond our comprehension to some extent. So are we not secure now?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we take measures and security is always top of mind in everything that we do. But with all due respect, given that this is a public forum, talking about some of the specific things that we do would also be putting us at risk if we get into certain details. But we certainly, it is on the forefront of our mind, and we are very cognizant to protect what we have there today.
Have we had a continuous budget amount with respect to security platform annually, Scott?
Through you, Mr. Chair, from looking at the previous budget, I believe there's an allotment of 60,000 every other year that was identified as part of within our envelope. But in all honestly, that is peanuts in comparison to what really trying to provide a full functioning and secured environment requires. Some more funding definitely than that.
Sure. Peanuts from an IT point of view, not from a taxpayer point of view.
No, I appreciate that, but that's the case.
Okay, so we'll take it on faith that that you're looking out for our best interests. This is all software expense, Scott?
Through you, Mr. Chair, some of these are actually, in this case, the cyber plan will be a physical document. Depending on what recommendations are, We are looking at a managed service, which basically continuously monitors our network.
Okay.
So that's a service.
So this is it'll be, some of this will be a third-party service.
Through you, Mr. Chair, some of it will be third-party services, some of it will be software we'll install internally. It all depends on what's identified in the plan and recommended.
And with respect to this capital item, is there any corresponding increase to your operating budget as a result?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is one of the things that we will be looking at this year with regards to how that gets handled. Typically, those subscription type services, those software as a services, those hosted ones where you're paying for, someone else to manage you and on their infrastructure, those are essentially like a lease. You keep paying, you keep getting the service. So either we have to look at increasing the operating budget to cover that, or we have to look at keeping it within a capital.
So it would be one or the other?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's my understanding. Perhaps I would maybe, Joelle, you might want to speak, if you could, to how we would handle.
So my question simply is, you've got $140,000 in capital to pay for this. Is there a corresponding increase in your operating as well?
Through you, Mr. Chair, not at this point. It was kept in capital.
Super. Okay. So it'll continuously be capital, and if it does become operating, it will come out of capital. Is that a fair assumption, Scott?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Joel, can you comment on that?
Through Mr. Chair, I think Scott answered the question to the satisfaction of Councillor McCurry.
It can be either capital or operating, depends how it comes coming forward. Okay.
Yeah, these are typically one time, although they're regular in nature, they're upgrades of a capital nature. So there's not sort of this ongoing type of annual costs that you might see with a software license or something like that.
Thank you. Councillor Weaver, you have the floor.
Thank you, Councillor Carpenter. Scott, I was wondering if you could explain to committee what occurred to Innisfil a few years ago. I believe it was Innisfil. I think it was a municipality below Barrie, where their internet system was taken over by a hacker and it was held for ransom.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the ones I'm more familiar with was the recent one, certainly out on the East Coast. I believe it might have been New Brunswick, and there was a neighboring municipality much closer to us, all of which, from my understanding, at least reading the media, had suffered some sort of cybersecurity breach, whereby there was a demand for like essentially ransomware, the encrypting of files and demanding of payment to unlock those files. That's my understanding as what's happening in some of the neighboring municipalities, or has happened.
Thank you for that. I would foresee this coming back again the next term of council. Technology continues to improve, and we as a municipality and a corporation have to actually make sure we're on par with that, so we're not left behind and vulnerable, essentially. So thank you, Scott. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Weaver. I have no others on the list. Oh, Councillor McCurry coming back on for the subject. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. Councillor Weaver's comment brought another thought to mind. I would suggest that it is in the correct place. It should be in capital rather than in operating, so we can be looking at this every year. As Councillor Weaver says, technology changes, and there may be some drastic changes to this as we go forward, and we sure wouldn't want to see it buried in operating. So I think you've got it in the right spot, Scott.
Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further on the list, I'm moving on to C6. That's the meter reading hardware replacement program. Any questions from members of the committee? Councillor McCurry, your hand was up first.
It's pretty quick, eh, Mr. Chair? I must admit that in response to Councillor Martin's question earlier, I remain completely uninformed about what this is all about. This project will allow us to upgrade the current meter reading equipment What specifically is the equipment?
The equipment is the handheld devices that the meter readers enter the meter reading into,
Okay.
that then gets transferred into the billing system to
Are
bill
these
the customer.
contract employees?
The meter readers are contracted employees, yes.
Sorry, what I should say is, are they employees of a contractor?
Yes,
Okay.
but we
Why
provide
does the,
the equipment.
yeah, why does the contractor not provide the equipment?
They do, they can, in certain situations. We have always provided the equipment. It gives us the ability to choose the type of equipment they use and integrate it more easily into our customer information system. And we've never had that in our tender. It's just been easier for us to have the equipment.
When does our contract go to tender next?
Another year.
In another year, okay.
Yeah.
So is there, other than the fact that we've always done it that way, which I've never found to be a significant reason to do anything going into the future, is there any reason why we would not require the contractor to supply their own devices to our specification to perform the duties of their work?
Yeah, sometimes it limits the people that are then able to bid on the contract, because they do have to incur those costs, and our contracts usually are for a shorter period of time. So we have found that it limited the people that were able to bid on the contract.
We've done that previously. We've specified the equipment to be provided at their cost.
No, just in dialogue with the meter reading companies, we have found that some were not able to bid if we had put that requirement in.
Well, yeah,
But
okay.
we could certainly consider that going forward next time.
Yeah, I wonder if you might, as I've suggested to Scott, I wonder if you might want to prepare a report to council outlining the options going forward with respect to having the contractors provide their own equipment.
Of course.
Okay. So you're saying this is at the end of its life and we're at the end of the life of the contract?
Well, the meter reading contract goes for another year. I believe it's 2022. So the meter reading equipment support ends this year.
Okay. So that equipment all becomes little boat anchors then? Is that the deal?
Right, yes.
Okay.
We do. Yeah,
All right.
unfortunately.
Okay. So when you say that we need to replace the meter reading system, what does that mean?
No, the software, well, we have this, the system consists of the software and the hardware.
Okay.
The software is okay. It's just the handheld equipment that the meter readers enter the equipment into.
So on your detail sheet, then, when you say the current meter reading equipment needs to be replaced, that's the handhelds, okay?
Yes.
And when you say the meter reading system needs to be replaced, that's the software.
Yeah, that was probably a misstatement. We don't need to replace the software. We just need to replace the hardware at this time.
Okay, so when you say we need to replace the meter reading system, that's completely redundant?
That's not correct. It's really the hardware that's part of the whole meter reading system.
Yeah,
so perhaps that wasn't clear.
Yeah, okay, so when you say we need to upgrade the current meter reading equipment, and then later you say we need to replace the system. So when you say replace the system, that's redundant.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilor McCurry. I have no other speakers on the list for this item. So I'm moving on to C7, which is the CRM upgrades. Any comments on the CRM upgrades? Councilor McCurry.
Mr. Chair, let me commend you on the speed at which you're moving things along here. It's tough to keep up with you. Sorry, just bear with me a second. I need to change pages. Okay, so we want to add functionality to make easier incoming mail handling, inform staff when cases are updated, easier integration options, easier interface for CSR when taking calls, allow easier use on mobile devices. This is $500,000 to increase our functionality. Is that good value?
Well, it was a recommendation in the KPMG report that we do upgrade the CRM system. The system is about 6 years old, and technology has changed significantly. The upgrade will allow us to chat with our customers. It will enable us to handle emails coming in to the system more easily, so they will go into our CRM system more. We can handle emails through our CRM system, where now currently we're not able to that easily.
So how do you receive info through the CRM if you don't receive it through emails? Just by telephone?
Yes, mainly by telephone. We do have an online method through the My Brantford that customers can fill out online forms.
Okay.
That does go through the CRM system. But if they send us an email, it has to be manually then entered into the CRM system. So that hopefully the new system will enable us to handle those more efficiently.
Could you not eliminate that problem by simply not giving them your email address? Making them do the online form?
Yeah. Unfortunately, customers like to use our email address. We do try to discourage it.
Yeah.
But often, other city departments will give the email address. So
Okay.
we're trying to encourage that, but it's difficult. So our emails are out there, unfortunately.
Okay, and with this additional functionality, are you going to need more staff?
No, hopefully less staff, not less staff, but no, not more staff.
Okay,
Hopefully it's more efficient.
So there's no corresponding increase to your operating budget?
No, we do pay a support for the CRM system.
Mhm.
So we think that the support is going to be about the same for the system.
You think?
It also has, well, yes, it'll be about the same. It'll be about the same. It also has the upgrade also provides for some technical improvements, and perhaps Scott can speak to those, but it eliminates the use of Java, and that was an important technical upgrade.
Yeah, sorry, that sort of nomenclature makes councillors' eyes just glaze over, Danielle.
That's right.
But I'll take you on your word that it's going to be a big improvement for you. So when are you going to be back to us for another $500,000?
The next upgrade is in 2027, I believe, in the long range capital plan right now. So not for a few years.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilor McCurry. Councilor Antosky, you're next on the list. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this may be a long shot, but I'm going to ask it anyways. For anyone who's worked on a CRM program, you understand the efficiency and how much better you can work. And I've always thought and wondered why councillors don't have a CRM program to help us manage our calls, our emails, especially same thing. We're getting contacts through every different, text, email, messenger. And often I'm trying to find where somebody contacted me, even when we try to drive them through a system. Is there any functionality or piece of the package, or because councillors would only need a very small kind of basic rendition of what you guys are dealing with, but could it be scaled down in any way that councillors could have a CRM program to manage their calls, their constituent work?
I think so. The issue is having that ability to transfer the emails into the CRM system. That perhaps has been kind of the roadblock. But that is a great idea, because it is difficult to manage customers' requests through all these different methods of communication. We can certainly look into that for sure.
Yeah, because, and again, for anybody who hasn't worked on a CRM, just for me to be able to put, Mr. Smith called, I'm dealing with X problem, and I can put a date 3 days out. It's going to remind me, it doesn't get buried in my emails. That's going to pop up. It certainly would, I don't know, maybe I'm just not as organized as everybody else, but it would help me be more efficient. I'd love to see if that could be possible.
We can look into that for sure.
Thank you.
Scott, can you add to that, Mr. Hall?
Yes, I can, through you, Mr. Chair, I can certainly add on to that. One of the things that we'll need to consider when handling that type of request is the MFIPA type requirements and protecting the information. Just because someone reaches out with one particular request doesn't necessarily mean that everybody else is entitled to see that. So we would have to ensure that privacy protection is in place. But from an access and getting accounts in that perspective, that would not be the issue.
Thank you.
I have Councillor Weaver next in the protocol. Thank you. Councillor Weaver.
Thank you, Councillor Carpenter. I just wanted to build on that comment that Scott had made. If we're actually able to, like sometimes we'll get a constituent that will email every single member of council individually, and we don't track that either. And I think we should, because I want to know if something's been promised by my ward mate or by the mayor or by somebody else, or if there's person's been provided help. Maybe I don't need to engage and start engaging with staff and trying to deal with those problems. So I would agree with Councillor Toski 100%. That's something we should have.
Thank you, Councillor Weaver. And seeing no one else on the list, I'm going to move on to time and attendance system C8. Any questions or comments on that? And I see Councillor McCreary. Are you ready? Councillor McCreary, you have the floor.
Yes, I was way ahead of you this time, Mr. Chair. So I'm having a hard time understanding this one as well as I usually do with IT, because you guys are so much more clever than we are in terms of understanding what the heck you do. So we got 60% of the way there. Is that correct, Scott?
That's correct.
Okay, was this a contract with a third party?
Yes, this is a contract with the actual software developer who was providing the services for implementation as well.
Okay, so we were just paying as you go. Is that the deal?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the original contract was for a lump sum based on their assessment of our needs, and the dollars were accounted for. Moving forward, everything that we need to do is on a time and materials basis.
Okay, so it's kind of like RV Anderson.
Through
Some
you,
of you
Mr.
will get
Chair,
that gag. Most of you won't.
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm
So
too young.
okay. So okay, I understand now. So they did as much as they thought they had to do, and now they're coming back for more. Is that kind of the short answer?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, they have, but they've also at the same time recognized that they didn't fully understand the requirements as much as maybe they needed to, and have also put in, I think, upwards of 1,200 hours of their own to accommodate for that as well at no cost.
Thanks very much, Scott.
Thank you, Councillor McCreary. Any more comments from committee on that at this point? Not now. Okay. C9 will be the IT services, the replication and disaster recovery. And Councillor McCreary, you're first on the list again.
I'm becoming quicker. So we haven't had a disaster.
That's correct.
And this will prevent having one.
That's not correct.
Oh.
This will ensure that our data is being backed up and safe should anything happen. There's
So
no
that's what's
silver bullet.
That's what happens when these guys ransom you, right? You've got to have all your stuff backed up and protected.
That's correct. We need that information where it's on a platform where it cannot be touched and encrypted. They encrypt what they can get access to.
Right. So then you can just tell them to saw it off, right?
Very much so.
Yeah.
That would be our plan. The
Yeah.
desire is to never pay ransom.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCreary. Councillor Vanderstelt, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Scott, hopefully you have an example of the cost of not doing something preventative in this measure. There must be an example of how much you can lose legally when you're not protecting your documents properly.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't have an exact dollar figure. A lot of it is just the embarrassment of it, as well as the business continuity side of it. If we can't recover, so for example, if we did not have our data backed up for the financial system and we weren't able to recover it, then all of a sudden we have lost all of those years of financial, employee, vendor data. That whether that's that system versus any of the number of systems that we have. That's the situation. Just not being able to provide business continuity, basically starting from scratch again. That's what we want to avoid. We never want to be in that situation.
And when you lose all that data, regardless of where you lose it from, it'll cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars to replace it.
And through you, Mr. Chair, if I can speak to something like the GIS system, there are thousands and thousands of person hours and time spent collecting all of that data over, well, in all the years that I've been here, which is pretty, 30 years. When I was involved with that system, I'd hate to see us lose that, and the dollar value would be huge. And that data is used for calculating out, everything.
That's right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Manderson. Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I've had I've had experience with this, helping organizations that have been hacked. And your Councilor Curry is quite right. What happens is it's an innocent email that an employee clicks on, and bingo, away it goes through your system, and your system gets encrypted. And if you don't have a backup, you don't really have the option of bringing a new computer system and then loading your backed up data into the new system and carrying on. There's several municipalities in Southern Ontario that have had to pay, the lowest is $250,000 to the hackers to get their encrypted data back unencrypted. And so the city does a pretty good job of working with city employees, educating them what not to open, what to be suspicious of, because you can't totally screen that stuff out with firewalls and whatnot. So this is the backup, not just for power failures that your system goes down, but in this day and age, it's really more about making sure your backup is happening in time, in real time, and not corruptible, so that you can survive a hacker's attack, which for many organizations, no matter what you do, is almost inevitable. It's going to happen at some point. So that's all I want to say. Thanks, Chair.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Seeing no other ones on the list, I'm moving on to PC replacement, 4C10, $50,000. I see a question up. I have Councilor McCurry and Councilor Ali. Councilor McCurry, you're next.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Scott, I see that you've got 100,000 in the 2022 budget. Can you indicate what that's for?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we typically would budget 100,000 each year. This year, as I mentioned, reduced it to 50,000, kept it there at 100,000 for next year. In all honesty, looking forward, I will likely reduce that for the sole reason that we're rolling out 400 laptops this year. Think about 3 years from now, 4 years from now, when we need to either upgrade or replace those, I'm going to need substantial dollars to do that. So the thinking is that I'm trying to gauge and what we need to replace now to have those funding in place for down the road.
Have we got rid of all the Windows 95 operating systems?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, Windows 95 is gone a long time ago.
I think we had that on our office. I think we had that on our office computer 2 terms ago. What's the oldest operating system you've got now, Scott?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we've just finished replacing the Windows 7 machines with Windows 10. So Windows 10 is our most current version.
Okay.
Certainly on the desktop units.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So how many on average are you replacing a year?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think last year with 100,000, we would have replaced upwards of 65 to 70, depending on whether there was monitors to be purchased. This year, banking on a cost of about 1,400, we're looking at about 35. But at the same time, I'm hoping that there are a number of PCs that are being replaced as part of the work from home with new laptops that are newer units that could then go to somebody else who has an older desktop who doesn't necessarily need a laptop. So there's going to be a lot of shuffling this year as we move things around.
And where do all the boat anchors go now when you're finished with them?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have a program with a vendor who actually comes in and does the destruction of the hard drives and gives us a certificate of destruction. And I believe then we get a small, they basically pay us a small fee because they can salvage some of the parts and that sort of thing.
Years ago, we used to turn them over to Sid and he distributed them, right?
That's correct.
Has there been any thought about resurrecting that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's certainly something that's possible, but quite honestly, the amount of time and effort that it takes for someone to do that work when we already have a lot on our plate, I'm not sure it would be the most effective use of our time.
Okay, thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Councilor McCurry. Councilor Utley, you're next. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Doing a great job. Scott, with all the laptops that we're getting now, do they all have video capability?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, they're all equipped with cameras and microphones.
Good. And iPads?
They have the cameras and the microphones as well. Yeah.
But do we buying a regular supply of those every year as well?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we don't necessarily buy the iPads to replace. It's more on request or demand, similar to that of an iPhone or a mobile phone. Most of the time lately, we've been rolling out more of the Windows 10 touch screen type devices, the yogas, the touchpads, those types of things, just because we can accomplish more on those devices. But there are some applications which are only specific to iPads, and then that's when we require buying those.
Thank you, Scott. Great job answering questions tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. We don't have anybody else on this, but I have a question for you, Scott. About how many would we be recycling each year?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't have the exact number, other than recognizing that it's going to be a 1-1 replacement for those units, but there's also a number of devices that were previously used by staff that are older, but kind of met their need. And, they basically say, you know what, we don't need them any longer. In reality, we should have got rid of them previously. So I would venture to guess it would be for next year, we'd be maybe looking at 50, 60 computers, maybe a few more, because we're replacing a whole bunch of them with the laptops. But on top of all that, we still have a lot of other hardware, printers, monitors that are no longer used that we send for destruction as well.
Thank you. And seeing no more questions on the list for C10, we'll go to C11, the IT, the Integrated Application Data System. Councillor McCurry.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. Scott, when I read the description, I thought to myself, what the dickens does it all mean? So this is a new program to integrate all the stuff that we do. Is that what it means?
Through you, Mr. Chair, essentially, yes, it was identified initially through the IT strategic plan to expand our integration of the systems. And that's what this strives to do. It looks at, in this case, the purchasing for about 30,000 of the Amanda licenses to allow us to integrate, which, as we discussed earlier, is a huge application for us moving forward as a core app to handle the requests of building and planning and development.
Does this reduce manpower needs at all anywhere?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I reference back to the HR onboarding project, where we were able to realize those efficiencies, cut staff hours, and realize the financial benefit, that's what integration allows us to do. You're eliminating that dual entry. You're really, you're basically sharing that data and simplifying the processes. So yes.
I recall years ago, maybe not that many years ago, there was a department which produced a report which then had to be manually re-entered by corporate to be able to produce something or other. So we don't have any circumstances like that left, have we, where we've got sort of orphan operations that that require translation?
Through you, Mr. Chair, not of my understanding, but part of this initiative and another initiative are looking and meeting with staff to understand how they're using data, where they're storing it, and anything that would get identified through there, we would look to improve how they're doing things.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor McCurry. Scott, is there any ability for us to provide such services to our boards and commissions, such as Library Board or John Noble Home?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I guess it would really depend on what the nature of that would be like. If it was looking at sharing data, then there would obviously be some issues around that. If it was looking at sharing applications, programs that, you know, so that they're not having to go out and procure a work order system of their own, or, you know, a financial system of their own, those types of things, then those are certainly the types of things we would look at. But you know, not having any familiarity necessarily with what they would require would require some investigation and on our part.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate that. And now that ends the items for discussion. Is there any members of council wish to move any amendments on any of the items on the list? And I see Councilor McCurry, your hands up.
Mr. Chair, thank you. On item 4C1, just bear with me until I find the page. Review of city fees and charges. Mr. Chair, what I would like to do is amend this to defer this item indefinitely and to prepare a resolution of council to create a task force to examine user fees and charges, which may then lead to the engagement of a consultant, as we did with the Red Tape Committee.
Is there a seconder? Councilor Utley.
And
comments or questions?
Mr. Chair, let me just speak to it briefly. This really is quite a parallel to what we did with respect to the Building and Planning Task Force. Okay, we've got political considerations, we've got cost considerations, and I think firstly, council should weigh in on this with a task force to decide what the terms of reference are going to be and what we want to see before we turn it over to a third party that's going to be giving us advice and making recommendations. So I would, tonight we would defer this and we would then ask staff to prepare a resolution to create that task force, which could come to a future council meeting.
And is it your intent that the $150,000 be attached to that as well still?
Not for 2021, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Comments on this amendment? Seeing none, Clerk, I'm going to call a question on the amendment. Do you have all the wording for that?
Through the chair, could I just get some clarification? Councillor McCurry suggested that he wanted to defer this indefinitely and for it to come to a task force which will be created. Councillor McCurry, are you trying to refer this budget item so that a task force can investigate the options?
That's a good paraphrase, Chris. So what we would do would be to create a resolution that would come to a future council, and the resolution would speak to the creation of a task force to examine user fees and charges.
And so instead of deferring this item, are you referring this to that body that will be created, or are you when are you deferring this budget item to? Is there a specific date you're deferring this budget item to?
You're asking very good questions. I'm usually the asker. I'm a bit of a disadvantage. So what do you suggest, Chris? We refer this to a task force to be created?
The city treasurer just suggested that we could remove this item from the capital budget. And then I would suggest, if you'd like a task force created, perhaps we can do that through the committee process by a notice of motion, and then we can kind of work out the wording for that, so that we'll go to the committee meeting and then it'll be ratified at a council meeting.
Perfect. So then our action tonight would simply be to defer this indefinitely or to remove it from the schedule.
I would just said, yes, I would just suggest that we vote to remove it from the capital budget.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the motion would be to remove it, and the direction to staff has been that they will help Councilor McCurry prepare a notice of motion for the things that you suggested.
Thank you,
it's
Mr.
already
Chair.
been seconded by, is that all right with the seconder, Councilor Hartley?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further comments on this? Seeing none, I call the question.
The removal of item 4C1 from the capital budget carries unanimously on recorded vote. Members of the committee voting in favor as follows: Mayor Davis, Councillor Weaver, Councillor Vanderstel, Councillor Utley, Councillor Sless, Councillor McCreary, Councillor Martin, Councillor Carpenter, and Councillor Antosky and Councillor Wall.
Thank you. Councilor McCreary, is your hand back up for some more further? You have the floor.
Mr. Chair, yes. With respect to item 4C2, HR master plan, I would move that we defer this to the 2022 year. And we heard from Anita that it would not create hardship and it would not leave her lacking of things to do.
Thank you. And your seconder is Councillor Vanderstel. Any questions or comments on this item? Seeing none, I'll call the question.
Through the chair, just waiting on Mayor Davis to submit his vote.
Mayor, you are unmuted again.
Yeah, sorry.
The deferral of the capital budget item to the year 2022 carries on a recorded vote of 9-1. Members of the committee voting in favor as follows: Councillors Vanderstel, Sless, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Weaver, Utley, McCreary, Carpenter. Those opposed, Mayor Davis.
Any further amendments? And I see Councillor McCreary's hand up, is back up there very quick. Councillor McCreary.
Mr. Chair, yes, with respect to item 4C4, I would like to amend it to capture the discussion regarding the preparation of a report to council by Mr. Hall to further describe this item. It has no impact on the capital budget, not moving to amend that, just looking for the report and to have it captured in the minutes.
Okay, well, I think we can, that direction should be clear enough that the direction will come forth before the end of the operating budget.
My intent was not before the end of the operating budget, but you know, it's going to take time for the report to be produced and probably wouldn't happen in this schedule. And I didn't intend it to be an item contingent upon approval of this item. Okay, we just simply need more information. This item is going to stay in the budget.
Okay, I'll accept that. Is there a seconder? Councillor Utley. Councillor Antosky, did I see your hand up?
I was just seconding. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Then I'll call the question on the amendment, which is a report to come to council.
The direction to provide a report from staff to council on item 4C4 carries unanimously on recorded vote. Members of the committee vote in favor as follows: Councillors Vanderstel, Sless, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Weaver, Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, and Mayor Davis.
Thank you, committee. And is there any other amendments to be moved forward by members of the committee? Oh, Councillor McCreary, I see your hand up there. You're on the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to item 4C6, the meter reading hardware replacement, the staff made a good case that we have to buy this year, but there was a discussion regarding the necessity for the city to own the equipment. I would like to, I'm not amending this out or anything, Mr. Chair, this will go forward, but I do want to see a report from staff examining the possibility of having future contracts include the contractor supply of equipment, all equipment and services necessary. So I'd like to have that report come back to us again sometime early this year.
Okay, including cost effectiveness, I believe. So you're looking for a seconder here?
Yep.
Councillor Sless is your seconder. Any questions or comments on the amendment for a report? Seeing none, we'll call the question.
Through the chair, just waiting for Councillor Sluss to submit his vote. The amendment to item 4C6 for staff to provide a report to council carries unanimously on recorded votes. Members of the committee vote in favor as follows: Councillors Vanderstel, Sluss, Martin, and Toski, Wall, Weaver, Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, and Mayor Davis.
Thank you. Moving on, is there any further amendments to any of the items on the capital projects on the 4C1 to 4C11? Is there any other amendments on the items 4C1 to 4C11? Kind of doing it like planning. Any other amendments to 4C1 or 4C11? Seeing none, then I'm going to move on to 4D. Do members wish to make any motion to add proposed 2021 capital programs as presented? And I see none. Thank you. Joel, could you please provide an overview for 5A and 5B, please?
Yes, thank you through you, Mr. Chair. So we are on the last step of the evening, step 5, which is the Community Development 2021 capital budget. There is only one project that's being submitted by the Commission for 2021 for a total of $350,000. Noted in 5B, the project is the purchase of fleet vehicles for building inspection staff at a cost of $350,000, and the detail page can be found on page 38 of your capital budget document.
Questions or comments on 5B1? Councilor McCreary.
Mr. Chair, thank you. If I'm correct, I believe this project involves the purchase of fully electric powered vehicles. Is that correct?
Good evening, Andy McMahon, Director of Building Services. Through the chair, Councillor, you are correct. That is what we are requesting. Our understanding at this time is the municipality currently only has one EV charging station located within the city. So that is something that we're going to have to consider. That capital cost that we have requested is just for the purchase of the vehicles. Our understanding was there was going to be multiple charging stations installed throughout the city. So whether that's going to happen this year or not, we'll have to wait and see. If they weren't available, then we would have to resort to purchasing gas vehicles, which would be a lower capital cost.
Thank you, Andy. So with respect to the operating costs of electric vehicles, what's the comparator between an electric powered vehicle and a gas pod?
Through the chair, the information provided from Fleet was the operating cost for an electric vehicle is about $8,000 per year, whereas a gas vehicle is about $8,500 per year. So for the 7 vehicles we are looking at, it's a difference of $56,000 for electric or $59,500 for gas.
And the lifespan would be?
All these vehicles are based upon a 7-year term of ownership.
So your savings over the 7 years would be about $22,000 to $25,000.
The savings in operating for using electric instead of gas, yes, would be approximately that much.
So about, yeah. So you can buy 7 small Toyotas suitable for this task for the total of $221,500, which is a pretty fair savings from $350,000. I'm wondering, is there a municipal policy that has led us to choose electric, Andy?
Well, as you stated, the cost of buying the gas vehicles is considerably cheaper. There is a small savings with the operating for the electric, but over the lifespan of the vehicles, it's not going to pay for the increased capital cost. So, I mean, the reason that we're requesting the electric vehicles is, to to be in line with the corporate climate change action plan. So that's why we're looking to use the green vehicles.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I'm sure there's a lot of constituents that would like to be able to afford an electric vehicle but cannot. You'd be just as happy to have gasoline powered cars, wouldn't you? You wouldn't be sad?
No, I would not be sad. I mean, the intent is to, provide vehicles for our staff, so they can do their job more efficiently and, provide that, that better level of service and be recognizable in the community when they're doing their job.
Yeah, that's absolutely essential. And I thank you for that, Andy. And Mr. Chair, I'll have an amendment on this when the discussion is concluded.
Oh, Councillor Natosky, you have the floor.
Thank you. Yes, I'm sure everyone's surprised I've got my hand up for this one. Yes, we're looking at cost, and the dollar cost is one piece of the equation. There are other costs that we need to look at, and one is environmental. There's social impact. There's all of those things. We've got people who do want and can afford and have electric vehicles that are also looking forward to the infrastructure here. It also allows people that have them now to stop in Brantford as a tourist spot when we put that infrastructure in. I think that we made a commitment to the climate action plan, and we need to show our leadership in that. And staff has taken that direction, and they've brought forward something that is looking through that lens. And I think as we move forward, we know that these costs are going to get better and better, but they're good now. They're efficient vehicles. And it's not even just gas. You don't have oil changes, things like that. So mechanical upkeep is also more efficient. So I hope that people will take all of the costs into consideration, not just the dollar cost. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Natosky. Next, I have Councillor Martin, Utley, and Davis. Councillor Martin, you have the floor.
Thank you. Through you to staff, the savings that were attributed for the electric vehicle, is that based on the usage of the electric vehicle that the city has, or is that just somebody's guess?
Through the chair, the savings, those are the numbers that were provided to us through fleet based upon, the capital cost as well as the annual operating cost for those types of vehicles.
Okay, I think the savings have been understated, because the savings for an electric vehicle, the energy savings are half of what it's less than half for the electricity as it would be to buy gas for a gas vehicle. Plus you're saving on oil changes, you're saving on brake changes. There's lots of other savings that factor in as well. So I think the savings have been understated in this, and it's something that we need to set a good example for. And I think we need a fleet of electric vehicles to test it out and find out what the actual savings are, because what's been quoted is very much understated. Thank you.
Yes, through the chair, my understanding is currently there's, I believe, only one fully electric vehicle in fleet. So I don't know if they have actually had enough data to really, firm those numbers up. So, we'd be more than willing to start that fleet out with our 7 electric vehicles. And I would just like to add that, this capital cost is, coming from the building department reserves. This is not coming from the tax base.
Thank you. Councillor Utley, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Andy, what's involved in installing charging stations?
Through the chair, that's a good question. I spoke with Lise Sordo today, and she advised that the cost of a charging station installed is between $12,000 to $15,000 per station.
And would you need? I don't think you'd need one per car, or would you?
in speaking with Fleet, based upon the amount of kilometers that our staff typically drive, they felt that we could charge every second to third day.
Yeah.
So I
We'll
would
just
think,
rotate them around. And I wonder if you could, when you look at the charging stations, I've seen some in the US that have solar panels on the top, and you park the car underneath in hot weather, it's in the shade, and all the time the sun's beating down on the panels, and it produces energy to charge the car. And the other part of the charging stations is how do they physically work to plug your car in? Do you have to start the energy phone by using some sort of key card?
unfortunately, I'm not that familiar with an electric vehicle. I don't own one, and I've never been in one, so I don't know exactly how the charging of it works. I see.
I know somebody that has one.
So if I can, through Mr. Chair, I have a little bit of background in this. The short answer, it depends, Councillor Utley. There is a system in place that you can use a card. There's other systems where it's just available to anybody public, and you have to have the right adapter and things like that. So most of them are cards, though, Councillor Utley, and either a credit card or a card you use to program in. A lot of them are used by your cell phones, or they're accessed by your cell phones. Ones down on Colburn Street, Wilfrid Laurier's lots, they're cell phones. You adapt them through your cell phone.
Thank you very much, Brian. Andy, could you and Lise bring a report back to us just to outline what's involved in setting up the charging stations and how they operate and by users? I think that would be very helpful to all of us. And the other question is, would they need to be done at the present location for at City Hall or the new City Hall? I don't need to know that right now, but if you could bring that information back to us, that would be appreciated. And Mr. Chair, if we need an amendment, I'd be happy to provide that.
Thank you, Councillor Utley. We'll come back to you if we need that. Mayor Davis,
Okay.
you're next, and I have McCurry, Vanderstel, Antosky, and Martin. Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Chair Carpenter, and through you. So, we made a commitment a year ago to move forward, to make the city more mindful of the contributions that we make towards the carbon created in our city and to mitigate that impact. And, today we've had one little car. We don't have enough experience with that vehicle to really fully understand what it's going to take to fully convert the entire fleet. And it's a big fleet. And that's why we couldn't start with buses. I mean, buses are too huge, too expensive. The technology is still too unproven to have started with buses. So this is a good way to start the program of converting our fleet to electronic electronic power of the fleet. You know what? It is a commitment we made to respect to climate change. Does it mean anything? Or is it just a bunch of words? I think it does mean something. I think we're pretty serious here at City Council and at the corporation to, take meaningful steps towards starting to mitigate and adapt to climate change. And this is one of the first steps. And what we're going to learn with this fleet of 7, as been said previously, we can then use that information, then capitalize on it to extend it out through the fleet over the next, 2 to 10 years. And I agree with Councillor Martin. I think that probably the savings have been understated because we just don't have enough experience with it. So I'm quite happy to support this, even though there is a bit of a premium. But I think in paying that premium, what we're going to learn and the knowledge that we can use to more extensively electrify the fleet will be invaluable. So I'm quite happy to support it as is.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. Second, next on the list, I have Councilman McCurry of the floor.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Andy, again. So there's no plan for where or how many charging stations yet that we'd be needing?
Through the chair, my thought for my department is we would need 3 to 4 of those charging stations. I know that the proposal that went forth earlier was to install 15 of these throughout various locations within the city at municipal buildings, usually 2 to 3 stations, per facility. Where those are actually going to end up, I don't know. I've discussed it with Lisa, and I've advised her it's a situation that we would need a parking space for the vehicle being charged, as well as a parking space for the employee's personal vehicle that they would drop off there to pick up that vehicle. So, that may dictate where they can go, where they have the space. I know there was talk of some at the new city hall.
But those numbers don't appear anywhere in the capital budget yet, is that correct?
Correct.
Now, you say this is coming from the Building Services Reserve Fund. What typically is that fund used for?
That fund is used for providing the services of enforcing the building code. So, it can be used for, technology that we need, staff that we need, vehicles that we need, anything that is involved in, providing the service of enforcing the building code.
Is that currently mandated by the province of Ontario that we have to endow that fund?
Yes.
And they stipulate the amount of money that we have to contribute?
They don't
stipulate the method of contribution, I should say, right?
Yes, we have to set our building permit fees in such a way that it recoups our costs and pays for us to run the department, and then allows us to create a reserve account for times when we need to use that reserve account to provide our services, or if we have leaner years and we need to draw from that account.
So you'd use that to hire additional staff if you needed them?
Yes, we could.
Okay. Now, we expect a much heavier workload with respect to building inspections as we begin to build out some of our development sites. What's your current balance in that account, Andy?
I don't have the exact numbers of the account right now. At the end of 2019, we were sitting at about 4.6 million. I estimate that once we get our numbers from finance, we should be just over 5 million, about 5.05 million.
Okay. So now, do you know who we expect to be repairing these vehicles and servicing them?
That would all be done through fleet. The operating costs include the fuel and maintenance.
So does fleet have a capital item with respect to being able to outfit our service facility properly to accommodate electric vehicles? Because there is as I understand it, there is an investment that has to be made. And is there a plan for training our municipal employees to be able to service these vehicles on day one when we receive them?
Yeah, that's a good question, Councillor McCreary, but I would not be able to answer that.
Okay.
That's 3 minutes. I'll come back. Can't put you back unless the Councillor McCreary wishes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Van der Stel, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I say what a fine job you're doing tonight, sir. Thank you.
Practice.
Do we have any comparative data on the current vehicle that we have, electric vehicle on fleet, compared to a vehicle of the same size, same mileage, same workload? I don't know who can answer that right now, but.
Yeah, I just going to help Andy out here a little bit. I think this we may I don't know how the chair wants to. These are questions that Andy. This is really questions of our fleet person, Shane Pepper.
Yeah.
And Andy, he's not on right at the moment, and I think it's unfair to ask him at the moment. He's got the analysis for them, so we could maybe try to ask those questions at a later time to Shane Pepper and have him in especially or to talk about this.
Yeah, absolutely. Where I was going with it, Mr. Hutchings, was I would like to see some comparative data. And I think this is a great opportunity. So after everyone is done speaking, I will perhaps bring an amendment to an amendment that might be coming forward. Thank you.
Point of order,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Vanderstel. Councillor Antosky.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Point of order. Go ahead.
I do apologize for interrupting. Since this information is not available at this point in time, and this is the basically the last item on tonight's agenda, why don't we adjourn and we can have this information for next week when we reconvene the estimates committee. Just a thought, Mr. Chair.
I'd like to continue at least for the question portion. There may be more questions that then staff can bring forward. And if they can't answer them, that's fine, but at least the questions will be available for them to answer coming back. I appreciate the point of order. Councillor Antosky, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, and my memory is telling me that we've got a grant out, a grant application out for charging stations, but I'm just looking for confirmation on that.
Yes, Councillor Antosky, we have, I think through Mr. Chair, Councillor Antosky, we have a grants application out for 17 charging stations. We were unsuccessful. We found out last month, but they have put us back into the mill, or whatever you want to call it, back in the application pool we find out in about April or May time for we've availed the second time through. And this would provide 17 charging stations, primarily by City Hall, but throughout the other parts of the city for other city vehicles to charge throughout the city.
Terrific. Thank you for the confirmation.
Thank you, Councillor Antosky. Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Through you to staff. Did I hear you say we have one charging station now?
Through the chair, yes, that's my understanding.
We have one charging station, if I can, through, and it's at the transit center. It's a T2 charging station, not a T1. It's not a T3. It's a T2, which is about 30 to 40 K per hour. The T3s do about 600 K per hour. So it's a T2.
Okay. Do we not have charging stations going into the new City Hall? Because that's something that I requested at the accommodations task force. They are proposed. That's just why they were applying for the grants so they could get the funding for it. So they are proposed and to go into the new City Hall, but they're trying to get the money to put them in. Has the wiring been roughed in to accommodate those? I believe so a good question. I'll have to get back to you on that if I want to answer that 100%. I was just on the phone with Lee's earlier, and I'm not sure if that's been done, but I know there's some. I would assume it has been, Councillor, but assumptions make. So I want to make sure that's 100% correct, because I know we were planning to have them in the new City Hall in the basement part of the parking, but I can't say 100%. Yeah, I'd like some definite answers on that, because that's something that was asked for at the accommodation meetings, and it's something that I was told that would be included in the new City Hall. And I got the impression that it wasn't dependent on the grant, that the grant would help pay for that if it was successful, but the charging stations would go in either way. So if we could get some firm answers on that for the next meeting, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor McCurry.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Andy, currently your folks drive their own vehicles.
Through the chair, that's correct.
So what do they think about this proposal?
I would say that staff are probably divided on the proposal.
Okay. So by paying the mileage on their own vehicles at 55 cents or whatever, I've got to think that folks are quite happy with driving their own vehicles to some extent. Are we changing their terms of employment, and can we expect grievances?
I don't think we're changing the terms of their employment. If they use their vehicle, then obviously they are paid that allowance through the collective agreement. But I don't think it's really a change of the terms of their employment. So I don't anticipate we would get a grievance, but I guess anything's possible.
They get, I don't know, I can't remember what the mileage is, like 55 cents, but don't they also get a per diem of $5?
No, that used to be the case. That was removed, probably over 10 years ago.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor McCurry. I have Councilor Utley and Councilor Vanderstelt for amendments to this. I'm going to be, after you move amendments for your requests, ask for a referral to further down the meetings up to January 26th for staff to answer those questions that have been asked as per Councilor Weaver's suggestion. So Councilor Utley.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Mr. Chair. Thank you. So I'll move an amendment that we refer this to the 26th to get more information on the charging stations. And I think Councilor Vanderstelt, did you want to add anything to that?
Councilor Vanderstelt, you have an item you want to add to that amendment, and then second the.
I would. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councilor Utley. I'm wondering if there's an appetite on council for a comparative study as a pilot project to buy half and half vehicles, same size, same workload, and actually do the study internally so we know exactly what we're looking for going forward. And that way we have better data, better information on our next purchase for our fleet.
Are you happy with leaving that as a question as part of the referral to staff?
Can we put that into an A and a B?
I'm asking Councilor Vanderstelt if you're asking that as a question, can we look at that option and get a part of that as part of the report that comes back to us?
Yes, Councilor Carpenter, to you and to Councilor Utley, A and B. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Councilor Antosky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a request that we separate A and B for the vote, please.
Yes, separation is always in order. Okay, seeing no, Councilor McCurry.
Is our intent to have fleet folks here on that night to answer as well as having Andy back?
Yes, and any staff that is necessary.
Yeah, sure.
Super. Thank you.
We've asked for separate. Joel, do you have a comment?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just want to perhaps suggest that Public Works is a week tonight. So there would be fleet staff in attendance at next Wednesday's meeting. Perhaps that would be more appropriate, given that we're hoping that estimates would approve the capital budget to be going to the regular council meeting on the 26th. So we wouldn't want that to delay that process. So perhaps next Wednesday would be preferred.
And we'll accept that as a friendly suggestion. We'll change it to that date for the next week. Okay. Agree with the mover and seconder. I see that. Okay. Can we call the question on A and B separately?
The deferral to the January 13th Estimates Committee meeting carries unanimously on recorded vote. Members of the committee voting in favor as follows: Councilors Vanderstelt, Sless, Marn, and Toski, Wall, Weaver, Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, and Mayor Davis.
Okay. And I know that in order to be procedurally correct, we probably should have passed B first, but we'll bring B up now.
Through the chair, to clarify, option clause B is for report.
Clause B was a report from Councilor Vanderstelt whether we could do a comparative study by doing 3 electric and 3 gas, I believe, and he'll correct me if I'm incorrect there.
You are correct, Councilor Carpenter.
We were just waiting for Councilor Martin's vote.
The wheels are spinning on my iPad, so I vote yes.
Clause B of amendment to item 5B.1 carries on a recorded vote of 7-3. Members of the committee vote in favor as follows. Councillors Vanderstel, Martin, Wall, Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, Mayor Davis. Those opposed, Councillor Sless, Antosky, and Weaver.
Thank you. Do any members of the committee wish to add any motions to add to the proposed 2021 capital program as presented? Seeing none, staff, could you please give us an update on the 2021 capital as of today?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. The citywide 2021 capital budget has been reduced to reflect the 4 projects that have either been removed or deferred out of the plan until next year. So our revised total at the end of this evening is $88,512,497.
And going further in each day that we're doing whatever capital budgets in front of us, can we have the full number of that particular portion of the capital budget and then the net reduction as part of the process going forward, so it's clear to what work council's done on that particular day?
Yeah, absolutely. We can include that on next week's worksheet.
And members of council, you will be getting the operating worksheet. And can you update council when they will see the operating worksheet?
Through Mr. Chair, right now the operating budget isn't scheduled to begin until the Wednesday, February the 17th, I believe. So it won't be until early February that information is available.
I think the Councillor Carpenter was referring to the run sheets for capital next week, the updated one. I think that might, if I can through Mr. Is that what you're referring to, Councillor Carpenter?
No, it was the council members have been asking me what the operating.
Oh, you are right. Okay.
Normally we would see that by now, but that's being delayed. So I just want to make sure that was clear to all members.
That was correct. I'm sorry.
Councillor McCreary, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While we're on the topic of the operating budget, could we ensure that we receive the detailed line-by-line budgets in a sortable Excel format, please?
So noted.
That's something, yes, we can provide that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, our next meeting will be January 11th. Have we not changed the time for that meeting, or is that meeting still 6 o'clock to staff?
Through the chair, that meeting's at 6 o'clock. The meeting that changed was January the 13th, and that one starts at 4:30 p.m.
And going forward in the future, just would like you to check with the counselors that have full-time jobs when we are scheduling meetings to make sure they can attend. I know they all want to be involved in this process. Thank you. Okay, that's the conclusion of night 1. We'll see you on January 11th at 6 p.m. Thank you for all your hard work.